Thank you. Welcome, everyone. As a reminder, per contract Costa Health Services requirements, masks are required indoors for all persons regardless of vaccination status. Um, I fully acknowledge that people have strong feelings about mask wearing. I recognize that not everyone agrees with the mask requirements, and I understand your frustration. But I would like to sincerely thank everyone in attendance for your cooperation in wearing your mask during today's meeting while in the building. Okay. Our meeting is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel, and a link to the recording has been posted to the district website. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that today is the 9th anniversary of the tragic shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School that took the lives of 20 first graders and 5 educators. Our hearts are forever broken that day, and I encourage everyone here, as well as those listening in, to think about an act of kindness we can carry out in our own lives in honor of those who were lost that day. And now I'd like to introduce my board members, Vice President Ken Mintz, Clerk Rachel Hurd,
Hello.
board members Laura Bratt,
Good evening.
and Shelley Clark.
Good evening.
And then we have our student board member, Ronit Batra,
Good evening.
and I'm your board president, Susanna Ordway. Okay, our student board member can cast a preferential vote, which shall not affect the final numerical outcome of a vote, but will be recorded in the minutes. Now, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight we're doing something just a little bit different. It's 5.1, and we have an annual organization of the Board of Education. So for the benefit of those who are new to our meetings, our annual organization is when the Board of Education elects new officers for the upcoming year, and we usually conduct this in our December meeting. Please note that the cover sheet states Clerk Ordway will direct the election. That's an error because I can't hold 2 positions at the same time. So I, as president currently, will direct the election. Okay, so board, is there a nominee for the position of president?
I'll nominate Ken Mintz.
Okay,
Second.
I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Oh, second. Okay. There's no more nominations. I guess we'll go down the road and vote. Shelley? Oh, sorry, Ronit.
Aye.
Then Shelley.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. So Ken, congratulations. You are our next president for this next year.
Thank you very much. And I guess I just pick it up right now. And go
That's true.
keep the
I
meeting
will.
going at this point.
Well,
And
okay.
well,
Are you going to continue with the other offices too?
I'll do that.
Okay. Then there
But-
you go.
But before I do, first I want to thank my fellow board members for the opportunity to preside over us for this next year. It's truly an honor to me. I've, been on the board for a while, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this board and to continue to work on behalf of the students in our district. And I really look forward to it. But before we move on to the vice president, I think it's really important that we take a moment to acknowledge the great work that Susanna Ordway has done as our president this past year. It's been an awful time in many ways, starting with lockdowns and virtual meetings and moving into online meetings and masking. But throughout all of it, Susanna has done it with such professionalism, with such poise. Many of you may not know that when someone communicates to the board as a whole, we've left it to the president to respond on all of our behalves. And she's done so in such a perfectly timely manner, a thoughtful manner, and a personal manner to each and every person who has contacted us in that way. And I believe she's done just a tremendous job in representing our board, not just here at the dais, but in the community. So others may have some other things they like to say as well, but I just want to start by truly thanking you, Susanna, for the work you've done on this board. I know when you first joined us as an appointee and then the full term, I know you probably were thinking, I'm not quite sure what I got myself into. And then when you sat down at the president's seat, it wasn't through the full progression. You never sat in the vice presidential seat. So you probably once again thought, what did I get myself into? But truly, you've done just an outstanding job for us and for the community. And I just want to demonstrate our appreciation from your fellow board members. We have a little party
Aw.
gift from this particular seat for you.
Great, thank you. Oh, this is nice. It's like a basket of goodies. Actually, lots of goodies. Yeah, food and beverages. That's what I love. I'm
Yeah,
a
you
food person.
Open up
You
that
need to
one.
open
You like to? Okay. But no, thank you so much. Oh, what is this? About is this a cheese board?
Okay, yeah, let's be clear that this is a cheese cutting board
Yes.
that's been engraved. It's not a paddle. That would definitely be
Like,
sending the wrong message about where we're going as a school
Right,
district.
yeah, exactly. That would not be my preferred way to deal with certain problems. But yes, thank you. Uh, and for the engraving too on, so this will be a little souvenir. That's great. Thank you so much. And no, right, Ken, when I took the both the president's seat and then also just being on the board of education, you know, it was a little different than what my expectations are. And then especially this last year, I can tell you that I'm not going to forget my term as president this last year through the pandemic. And but you know, hopefully I was able to serve the students and staff and everyone on the community too in this term. So, and I'm going to continue, of course, doing that. Maybe not as president, because now you get to do your thing, but I continue to work for our school district and for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Anyone else like to make a comment?
As a new board member, I just want to say that you rose to the occasion in a very, very difficult time. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate your leadership and your courage, because it took courage to be in your seat this last year. And it's meant a lot to me to watch you. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
Yeah, and I want to echo that and say thank you for being a role model for me. I really appreciate your strength, your fortitude, your calmness under fire, and your friendship. And I'm grateful for it. So thank you for all the work that you've done for our students and our school district.
Thank you, Laura.
And I'll just add, Susanna, we've worked together for many years in PTA. I consider you a longtime colleague and also kind of a mentee. And it's just been a joy to watch you grow in this year. I know it was really hard, but I just think you've blossomed. And
Thank you. Yeah, a bit of a trial by fire, but I think.
And then thank you for getting me acquainted with all of the operations, getting accustomed to how like basically everything works. Since I've been here, I've just been used to seeing you in that position and being able to guide me throughout everything. So I was really appreciative of that and all the work that you've done for the student body.
Oh, thank you, Rana.
Okay, thank you again, Susanna. In terms of moving into this role of facilitating meetings, I truly am looking forward to hearing from the public. It's something that we as a board have always held to be an important part of this meeting. Keeping in mind that it is a working meeting for us as a board. It's not a public hearing. If there seems to be times for us to conduct that type of a thing, we'll work on that. But please keep in mind that these are working meetings for us, and we hope that you approach it as such, because all of us, I believe, need to continue, particularly in the difficult times that we're in these days, uh, to be foremost in thought about our students and what's best for them, and do so with civility and respect in our language and our actions, because here as a public forum, we're setting a role model for our students and our children. And I think it's really important that what they get out of that is we can disagree without being disagreeable. And so that's how I'm hoping for us to continue as a board, as well as through our engagement with public communication. Moving on at this point, our next election of officers is for the vice president. Can I have a nomination, please?
I nominate Rachel Hurd.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for Rachel Hurd to be vice president. Cindy, can you call out the vote, please?
I'd be happy to. Student Board Member Botcha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Congratulations, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Next, we have the position of clerk. Again, may I have a motion?
I will move Laura Bratt for clerk.
Second.
Cindy, please call out the vote.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Ordway. Call out vote. Student Board Member Botcha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, and congratulations, Laura. That's right. You may be asked at some point in the year. Moving on to item 5.1B, the 2022-23 meeting calendar. This was in our board packet. These are the dates that the Board of Education would hold its regular meetings. There was one alteration. I believe it was November 14th is actually November 15th. Any questions or comments from the board on the meeting calendar? Not seeing any. Can we have a motion to approve the calendar?
Make a motion to approve the calendar as submitted.
I'll
with one
second.
correction.
I'll second.
Thank you. The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Botcha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. On item C, we have liaison and committee assignments. In addition to attending our regular board meetings, each of the board members take on additional responsibilities in terms of dealing with the in-house committee assignments, working with staff, as well as with other agencies. One of the things that I've always been excited about here in the Valley is the amount of cooperation that we have between our different agencies. For instance, working with the town of Danville, the city of San Ramon, the fire district, and the county. And so each of us have different roles that we play in the community, as well as within the different committees of the school district. On page 13 of our board packet, we have our current assignments. And so I'd like to open up for questions from board members who want to consider different assignments or holding on to existing assignments. And just kind of open that up for conversation.
Well, I would like to be able to have some experience with some of the other areas that I haven't worked in before. And also be able to connect more with maybe the parent community. Because some of the assignments that I've had have been on other things. So
Was
I
there
don't know how
anything
we
in
wanna
particular,
handle it.
Shelley, that you'd like to? Okay.
I would like to be involved in the LCAP or the PTA or the Ed Foundation? Any one of those, or
Okay.
Would you like to take the PTA Legislative Advocacy Committee, Shelley? From me?
sure. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel. Any others? Okay, Laura.
I wanted to see if I could move back into the LCAP. With only one steering committee position, I would like their opportunity to kind of be involved in that level of leadership, and I really enjoyed LCAP when I was a parent representative.
Would you
Yeah,
be
I'm-
willing to trade with someone for something?
No.
Go ahead. Susanna's ready to speak.
And I was going to offer, if you like, perhaps you can.
Yeah, and if I need to step away from something else, that's fine too.
And with Shelley, I mean, you can have, I've been on the LCAP for a long time. If you'd like to have
Yeah, and I can-
Susanna's willing, I think you both could have time
I'm
on the LCAP.
happy to trade
That
any
sounds-
of the positions that I have also.
That's great. So, so it sounds like LCAP instead of Hurd and Ordway, we'll make that into Brad and Clark. Laura, any others? Would like to stay on the other ones that you're currently on?
If possible, but if someone else wants to step into one of my other positions, but
Okay. Rachel, how about you?
I'm good with what I have left, unless somebody wants something that I have.
Okay.
Playing poker here.
Well, thank you for
Right.
stepping up on the LCAP and the PTA ones.
Yeah,
Susanna,
no,
how about you?
I'm also good with what I have, unless, yeah.
Okay. As am I. From a district perspective, any questions? We made this kind of easy. Everything else okay?
Everything is fine.
And as you can see, board members added to the list this year are some of our directional items, the strategic direction committees. And I think everyone's pretty much just starting on those, so we'll
Yeah.
keep those as
Mhm.
the same as well. Okay. There is the one question that is on here about CSBA delegate assembly. My understanding is, given our size, we can actually have two representatives to the delegate assembly. One of them is an appointed position. The other one would be part of, would be up for the election process. So we may or may not get that second seat, but we could get a second seat on the delegate assembly if someone were to choose to run, even though one person would be appointed. Currently, Rachel, you sit as our representative, I believe, on the delegate assembly. So I guess the question would be, if you wish to continue with that, and would you want to do it as the appointed member? And if not, who might be interested later? That's something that we could handle later on when.
Actually,
vote
we
next.
can't really do it later because the nomination process, the applications have to be in January 7th.
So whoever's interested would have to.
Yeah.
But I guess the point is that there is the possibility for a second spot once we determine. Rachel, if you're going to stay on as our.
I would very much like to stay on, and I'm on a policy committee, so I'd really like to not lose that position if that's possible. So if you guys don't
Yeah, I'm
mind,
good
I'd
with
like to
that.
stay in that.
Okay.
And
So-
this is probably our last 2-year term of getting that appointed position because of our ADA dropping.
Dropping. Sure. Okay. So just leave it open then that if that's okay with everyone, if you are interested, as Rachel mentioned, January 7th would be the deadline for applying for our new members. I'm not sure if you've gone through that process. We'll get a slate of candidates for our county and vote for those, and you could apply to be.
So the way that it's the appointed one and then the nominated one,
Right.
our board would want to nominate our nominee. So like we're sort of like endorsing our
Hmm.
member. So if someone wants to do it, I think we should take action to nominate them. And then if they decide they don't want to do it, they just don't submit their application. But I think
Sure.
we ought to do that tonight so that it's all ready to go by January
Got
7th
it.
if they want
Thank
to
you.
do it.
Thank you for clarifying that. Is someone interested in doing that? No?
Well, that
Not,
makes
not,
it
at-
easy.
not this point, huh?
At this point.
Okay, good. All right. So it sounds like then our set of liaisons and committee are then set with several changes.
Quick question on the committee
Yeah,
assignments
yes.
overall. So I'm currently on LCAP as a student member. Apart from that, as a designated student board member, would I be able to get involved with other committees, or would I be more in like the role of a student in that regard?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
So I can answer that question. You are welcome to any of the steering committees, even though we have the equity, the deep learning, and the social emotional well-being. We do have other students there, so that's something you could work out with Mr. Campopiano in the Senate, but you're always welcome to participate. And then how you and the students who are presently on those committees orchestrate the work together, and then really get as many student voices involved in that work. I would see, based upon our conversations previously, those three subcommittees and LCAP would be the most significant. And then, of course, you making your own decisions, how you manage your student life and your student schedule and such. That's something you and I have talked about before. But I would suggest that when you decide if you wish to be formally a part of the three, you're already part of the one, we'll be sure to add your name to that official list that is public, the one we're working on right now.
Yeah, could we add me to those three committees? And this is for the 2022 year, correct?
This is for this next December to December.
Yes. Yeah.
So- So at least for the next 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Do we need any kind of vote on this one? I don't think so, just to
You
make sure
don't, but
everyone-
you do want to talk about site liaison.
Oh, yes. If you go to page 14 of 527, the way that we've handled our liaisons with particular schools in the past was kind of a mix across the districts that we've changed every other year. So you'd be connected to a particular school for a couple of years. The question has come up for conversation now. We could just continue as we have done, or is there interest in doing something that's more district area focused now that we've moved into that type of approach, or some combination of the two?
The
Any
way
thoughts?
our trustee areas were divided so that we didn't become the board member representing this high school or that high school or this elementary school or middle school would make dividing them up by trustee area pretty difficult, kind of by design when we went into the CVRA process. So,
Well, and the other thing is that, particularly at the high school level, there's 2 or 3 trustees who are assigned or are within their trustee area as well. So we already have that to a certain extent. So is there an interest in leaving it as and going to the next year? So switching these,
Well, I would have
Group numbers?
interest in a change, not to district by district, but just a change because I've been on board now for going into my 4th year. And because of the pandemic, we decided not to change. So I've had the same assignment for all through my, my term.
and I think
Which
we
is fine.
decided to rotate at the
Right.
beginning of the school year every 2 years. I mean, we could switch it to every year, but I think it makes sense to have this rotation match up with the school year so that we're their representative for the whole year. I
so
mean,
why don't we, I think that makes a lot of sense. Is everyone okay with that? We leave this in place for now and we'll address this at the end of the school year or at the beginning of this next school year?
or we could just plan on doing the next shift. I mean,
Yeah.
these were set up so that it was rotating. If we want to rotate every year, though, that would allow you in a 4-year term To hit
all
most of them.
all comprehensive. Yeah, I mean, I would like to rotate every year. I think that you know, especially with us being by district, that I think it's important for each of us to really have a full understanding of the entire district, and that opportunity. And with the 4 comprehensive high schools, I mean, it's really 5 schools, so it we're not really going to have an opportunity, each of us, to be at all 4 comprehensive high schools. But I would like to see, and I think that rotating at the beginning of the school year would be the most logical standpoint. I do question, though, given that there hasn't been a rotation in the last 2 or 3 years of I don't know. I mean, it's waiting another 6 months. Does that matter or not? I don't know, but just thinking about that.
I'd like to see it rotate every year also. I'm okay with waiting until the beginning of the school year because I haven't been able to, with everything that's been going on with the pandemic and everything we've been dealing with, I haven't been able to even get around to visit all the school sites that are on my list. And I would be able to do that if we waited until the beginning of the next school year. And I would like to be able to do that. But I definitely would like to see a rotation so I could get around to more schools.
So if it would be okay with everyone, how about we add this to our last agenda of this school year? That way you go into the summer knowing what your schools are. So if you want to participate in back to school nights or anything like that, it won't be, you know, right there at the time, but you have some time even to check in with some of these folks before the school year even starts. Does that make sense, everyone?
It
We'll
does,
do
but
the
I don't think it
rotation.
needs to come before us. I think it's just, that's practice, and it would
Yeah.
rotate, and Cindy would send out in
Right.
July, these are your schools for this year,
Yeah.
and she'd send to the schools, this is your trustee.
So let's just make sure right at the end of the school year, though, that we're all set. Okay, good. All right, moving on to item 6.0, report of action taken in closed session. And we do have one action that was taken during closed session tonight. The board voted in agreement on a 5-0 vote with the district's recommendation to a settlement in response to Office of Administrative Hearing case number 202-1109790 for a total of $71,500. Moving on to item 7.0, acceptance of minutes. And we have the minutes, let's see. The minutes are showing up as the incorrect minutes are included in the packet. However, these are for the minutes from the November 16th meeting. Is that correct, Cindy? Did I get that right?
The minutes sitting in front of you are from November 16th. The minutes included in the packet stated November 16th on the minutes, but they were actually the October minutes. We had a little technical difficulty, so our apologies.
Okay.
So they're right here.
So, yes, so at the dais, we have the correct minutes. Does anyone have any corrections, submissions? Okay, in that case, we can get a motion to accept the minutes of November 16th.
Motion to accept the minutes of November 16th.
I'll second.
Okay, in that case, give me a moment to go through these quickly to see where that might be. You can go ahead and get the motion out of the way, however. Shelley, go ahead.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Brat. Call out vote. Student Board
Oh,
Member
yeah, I'm sorry.
Batra,
Not the call out yet, just the motion.
just the motion. The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Brat.
Okay, so Mr. Roddick, did you actually want to speak or just go ahead? Why don't you come up to the podium?
I requested previously, and this is just a repetition of that request, that the minutes reflect not only who spoke, but what was spoken about. Just a quick mention of what the topic was and what the position was that was taken. Ken, you said you look forward to this segment of the meeting. I do too, because it's where the people who pay the bills here get a chance to express their own thoughts about what's going on. So just a simple request to make the minutes more effective, more valuable for everybody who reads them. Some little indication of what has been said about what topic and what position was taken if that's what's involved. So that's a formal request. I requested once before, and I'm repeating that request now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we have the call out vote, please.
Call out vote. Student Board Member Bacha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. And Mr. Rada will under advisement and determine, because I know there were reasons why we've done it the way we have, but we'll relook at that. Okay, moving on then to area 8.0, agenda approval and consent actions. 8.1 is acceptance of the open session agenda. Can I have a motion?
Move
please?
approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call vote, please.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Ordway. Call out vote. Student Board Member Bacha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving on to approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda for the audience are a number of mainly administrative items that do not require a lot of background or presentation. And so instead of taking individual votes, we take one vote on the whole set. And the set then is item 11.1 to 11.20. However, if someone from the board or someone from the public wishes an item to be pulled from consent and be treated as an individual item, that will be done. I know, Mr. Rajinski, you don't want to pull it, but you had some comments about one of our items. Why don't you go ahead and?
Yes, I'll actually make just one revision. On item 11.14, there is a correction to the buyer job description. In the copy that was included in the packet, it was listed as a range 15 position. It's actually a range 16 position. It's the only change in the job description. There should be copies for the board at the dais, and there was a supply of copies in the back for the public as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. From the public, I have a request to move item 11.3, which would then become 10.12. Item 11.9, which would become 10.13. And item 11.16, which become item 10.14. Are there any other items that board members would like to pull at this point for further clarification or conversation? Okay.
I move approval of consent.
Yeah, let me
as-
just check, make sure that I didn't miss anything from the
Okay.
audience. I'm going through papers here. Doesn't look like it. Okay, thank you, Rachel.
You need me to say it again, or is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
I move approval of consent as amended.
Thank you.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Bacha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye,
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
thank you. Okay, so we now move into, and Mr. Rajinski, thank you for your comments too.
Thank
to
you, thank-
clarify.
Thank you, President Mintz. I did want to take just a couple of moments, and I appreciate the indulgence to be able to speak to the board's approval of item 11.14. I think it's important to acknowledge tonight what the board's approval represents and to extend some sincere words of appreciation to some of the individuals who were very critical in bringing this to closure tonight. The board's approval of these new 123 classified job descriptions brings closure to what has been a colossal and I believe a very important undertaking that's taken over 2 years to accomplish here in San Ramon Valley. The classified classification and compensation study that began in the fall of 2019 is one of the largest in scope, magnitude, and complexity that I've been involved in the many years that I've done personnel work. What's emerged from this project are job descriptions that now accurately reflect the contemporary duties and functions of jobs performed by our classified employees and jobs that pay fairly relative to each other within the school district and in comparison with like agencies, including school districts outside of the area, but within this region. We want to sincerely thank the leaders of our classified bargaining units, namely CSEA President Tammy Castelluccio and SEIU President Carrie Lucchini, their negotiating teams, and their members for agreeing to participate in and support this project, and for their good thinking, their contributions, their patience, and their commitment to see this project through to the end, despite the various challenges and hiccups that we faced along the way. Without their commitment and collaboration with the school district, and of course, not to mention the support and the direction of the board that began over 2 years ago, tonight's outcome would not have been possible. So again, to our classified leaders, thank you. And to our board of trustees, thank you.
And Keith, on behalf of the board, we really want to thank you, your department, as well as our association colleagues for all of the hard work. It was a long, drawn-out process, a very inclusive process. I mentioned earlier that we had over, 527 pages in our staff report. About 400 of that was this particular item and the amount of detail that went into it. So thank you very much. I think it puts us as a district in a much better place to have these updated job descriptions and clarity for our employees. So thank you again. Moving on to item 9.1, which is public comment for non-agendized items. This is the opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board on items that are not on the agenda. However, because they're not on the agenda, we cannot get into any communication with you on those. If it was an item that requires further conversation, we would see about having it put onto a future agenda. But please don't take our just sitting back and listening to you as anything other than what we're allowed to do. We are, however, as I said earlier, very interested in your comments. Our speakers this evening will be limited to 3 minutes. We ask that you do finish right at the 3 minutes, or preferably even before if you can finalize your comments, just so we can keep our meeting going. With that all said, first item I have is Mike Arata.
Good evening, members of the board. Last February, 2 of your teachers presented an online CTA discussion entitled Affirming LGBTQ+ Identities in Elementary School. Fox News recently exposed one presenter's comments, saying that holding lunchtime LGBTQ meetings with students helps eliminate some of the parent interaction which would occur were such meetings held before or after school. Here's a 30-second clip.
If there are kids who would like to attend, but maybe their parents are unaware that they're interested in participating or unaware that they're out at school. So if we can get it to happen at lunch, that seems like a really good structure to protect the kids' identities and protect and allow them to attend.
Such concealment flouts U.S. Code, 20 U.S. Code, Section 3401, which in part affirms that parents have the primary responsibility for the education of their children, and states, localities, and private institutions have the primary responsibility for supporting that parental quote unquote. But now LGBTQ activism begins with 4th and 5th graders here, that is 9 to 11-year-olds via so-called Prism Club meetings at lunchtime. No parental permission is required, and no parental notice to parents of a child's attendance is supplied, thereby circumventing parents not supporting them. That's a bad idea ethically and developmentally. It remains a bad idea in middle school. Gender Sexuality Alliance is so-called for 11 through 14-year-olds. From roughly age 7 through early puberty, kids experience a latency period. By nature, they usually don't think much about sexual matters at these ages unless pushed by adult activists or predators to do so. Rapid cognitive learning occurs during this time, and kids form primarily same-sex friendships, boys with boys, girls with girls. But activist teachers can manipulate latency cohort kids to mistaking same sex friendships for homosexual inclinations, or to begin believing that they've been born in the wrong body. That form of teacher activism amounts essentially to unlicensed amateur psychotherapy. 70% or more of kids who think they're transgender will grow out of that belief if it is not reinforced via social transition affirmation, hormonal intervention, or surgical mutilation. That's why parents should be informed of sexually dysphoric behaviors and associations of children at school. Too many administrators and teachers here instead continue to believe that children think like adults because they are adults who think like children. You should instead let kids be kids. You should stop trying to manipulate their minds, hearts, and souls with your adult level homosexual and gender bender activism. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker I have is Helen Churn. Helen, is that you? Yes. Is Churn? Is that how you pronounce your last name? Did you want to speak? No? Okay. Next speaker, Gordon Sanderson.
Thank you for your time today. The reason I'm up here for this is a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of board meetings ago, was a equity training, and I found a good portion of that, while well-meaning, offensive in some regards. There's an inherent racism that's attached to that, and what I think the school should be focused on is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's what the school should be teaching. But we start wading into really dangerous waters when we go into math is racism, which is California is adopting, right? CRT, which is really a Marxist entity or an origin of teaching history, okay? Restorative justice. And on that, some of you may recognize this, Timothy Simpkins, Kyle Rittenhouse. This is kind of an example of social restorative justice. This young man went into a school, shot 4 people, including 1 teacher. He got a $25,000 bail and was out the next day. We all know what happened with that car running over people, where the gentleman used it as a weapon against his wife, his girlfriend, right? And he's out literally on bond within a day, right? And these are, Soros-led district attorneys, attorney generals that are really trying to muddy the waters of what real justice is about. And we're not seeing that anymore. And so it's very important as you listen to the people that are coming up with just mountains of buzzwords, saying, just using circumlocution and saying so many things without saying anything at all when it comes to real justice. Okay? Let's teach history the right way. A lot of people in this land did many good things. Who ended slavery in the United States? Who gave women the right to vote? Who passed civil rights legislation and many, many other things? But what CRT and many of these other things seek to do is diminish those things rather than looking at the whole truth, right? And so that's all I want to say about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, it didn't say an agenda item. I suppose it's for a non-agenda. Lisa Disbrow. Is that your name? I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly.
Okay, good evening, board and audience and all those on YouTube. And I want to particularly thank those in our faith community leadership who are watching tonight. A similar situation to the one where San Ramon Valley teachers were videoed at a CTA conference happened to Salinas teachers who are also involved in a CTA conference. These two teachers are from Spreckles Union School District, Salinas. We know it as Salinas. They were videoed suggesting to parents, or not to parents, to teachers, how to persuade children to participate in LGBT clubs during lunch. And as a result, there was a lot of community blowback. And this is the letter that the school district produced. Dear Spreckles Union School District, our staff, administration, Board of Education are committed to supporting safe, inclusive, and equitable learning environments that support all students without including, sharing, or promoting any political opinion or agenda. Recently, an article was written that quoted two of our Buena Vista Middle School teachers who presented at a CTA conference in Palm Springs. The teachers were using personal leave to lead a breakout session in their roles as CTA members. They were not officially presenting on behalf of our district, nor were their presentation materials or comments reviewed by our district administration. Many of the comments and themes stated in the article are alarming, concerning, disappointing, and do not in any way reflect the district or the Board of Education's policies and practices. The district has taken steps to address several of the concerns. The student club mentioned, UBU, has been suspended. Any future clubs will be required to submit an online of all activities and materials before being allowed to meet. Student sign-in sheets will be maintained and parent permission slips will be sent home prior to club holding a meeting. We would like the same thing for all those clubs, Equity, UBU, and Prism clubs in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. We would also like to know if you support the comments made by the two San Ramon Valley teachers at the CTA conference. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If I can just please remind members of the audience that we are under a mask mandate. And if you're in this room, you must be wearing a mask. If you choose not to wear a mask, we ask that you please leave. Otherwise, we cannot hold the meeting. I made the comment. Please, everyone, please keep to the mask mandate. Angela Plummer, I do not, this agenda item, I assume it's for this item. Is that true? Oh, please get up there.
Hello again, I'm Angela Plummer. Thank you all for being here. I know you guys put a lot of time into these meetings. I just passed out a couple of articles. What I'm really here about tonight is my concern for the mental health of our kids. We knew from 2019 to 2020 with the onset of the pandemic, emergency room visits went up 30% related to the pandemic. Now, as was recently released, American Pediatric Association and multiple other medical entities are declaring a national emergency for our kids and the mental health. And the biggest component of that is obviously this pandemic. I know that our board, kind of our go-to is to fall back on whatever our county health department says is the stance they're taking. However, I am really asking you to start advocating more for our kids and not just accepting what the county health department says. I'm seeing some wonderful school districts and boards throughout our state stand up for their students and say, these things are not working for our kids and their mental health. Standing up for mask choice in schools. I know their governor just made an announcement, but as soon as it is possible for masking choice, talk to our teachers and our parents about the dramatic effects of the masking socially, academically, especially for young learners and for teens. The stress on these kids is just out of control, and you guys are our voice. We're asking you to do more than just state what this county health is saying. We're asking you to write letters advocating for parent choice with vaccines, not pro-vax, not anti-vax, advocating and knowing the statistics. We are the only state, the first state to try to mandate vaccines in schools. Our mortality, or I should say our survival rate in this state is 98.5% for COVID. Texas, we all know Texas and Florida were massive scientific experiments that, as a former journalist, I sat back and said, wow, we're really going to see the effects of this pandemic. Texas, 98.3, Florida, 98.4. That is from Johns Hopkins everyday update on COVID statistics. I encourage you to know these numbers, to advocate for our kids, and to advocate for us parents, to be parents and make the best choices for our children. Suicide rates for our teenage girls this year are up 51% from last year. We have got to pull ourselves out of this pandemic. And when you look at the 1918 flu pandemic, how did we get out of that? Not with mandating all this stuff. It took 2 to 3 years. As the virus mutated, it gets weaker. And that's exactly where we're going with our first wave of this virus. Then the Delta was less severe, and now we have Omicron less severe.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I have one more speaker card. It's for Helen.
It's really funny. You're trying to call me something I'm not. I've come to this meeting many, many times. I've always been known as Helen of Doherty Valley. Maybe I'm Helen He, because last time I was dropped from the agenda notice, and then I called Cindy, hey, what's up? How come I wasn't notified to come to the agenda? And then she told me that, oh, she got an email and, to request that I be dropped off, and I became Helen He. So why don't you call me Helen He in the future? If you wish to address who I am, on the card, I clearly say I'm Helen of Doherty Valley. Please do not try to get somebody killed because of me. My public comments are, number one, SRPD tonight at one of the special council meetings just said that there is an increase of car break-ins in Doherty Valley because of the woke agenda. Our incompetent public defender who is supposed to defend us they don't. So now we are left by ourselves to defend ourselves, just like I'm trying to defend me and other innocent Helens from you. So I want to caution you to please increase patrol on our campuses, especially in Doherty Valley, so that our student cars don't get broken into, our principals, our administrators, our teachers, staff don't get broken into. And then secondly, I want to say that tonight's meeting is a joke. The packet was almost 600 pages. Which one of you read every single page? Don't tell me you did. This is a joke. You skipped a meeting last week and pack everything together today. Please do your job. To pack everything 600 pages together and expect us to believe that you're doing your job? No, you're not. Okay, you're flying by just making sure your agenda gets passed, and you're not really looking out for anyone. It's really sad. Again, I'm Helen of Doherty Valley. Please don't ever call me anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Seeing no other items for public comment, item 9.2 on the agenda is Association President's comments. Tammy Castelluccio. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tammy Castelluccio, president of CSEA. First, I would like to thank the board for their approval on the consent agenda item of 11.14 of the new position descriptions resulting from our classification and compensation study. Both negotiation teams have worked long and hard to finalize this process. It has been a long 2-year process, although it felt like longer than that. I would like to thank all the CSEA employees for being patient with us through this process, as well as for their input along the way. I would also like to thank the district and CSEA negotiation team for their hard work and due diligence. This was a huge undertaking, but we can now put this study to rest and move on to our future negotiations regarding the CSEA 2 and 3 salary schedules. In addition, before you this evening is the joint reopener proposal that CSEA and management will start negotiating in January. Your approval of this proposal is greatly appreciated. We look forward to our continued collaboration and partnership with management. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays and a restful break. Thanks.
Thank you. Laura Finko.
Good evening, Ken. Susanna, thank you for your leadership. And I look forward to continue working with you as you move to a different role onto the board. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Laura Finko. I am the president of the San Ramon Valley Education Association, where I represent the over 1,700 non-managerial certificated personnel of the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. Tammy, congratulations on that job description. I think that's pretty much probably the bulk of those 600 pages, right? Yeah, that was a great endeavor, and I wish you and management the best of luck as you continue your negotiations. We also enjoy a very positive working relationship in our negotiations, and we look forward to moving forward. We have our successor agreement coming up, which is our 3-year review, and hoping that we can be as successful as we were with this 1-year agreement that we just finished. SRVUSD set out our Support Our Students campaign in an effort to bring focus to the one thing that I think that everyone in this room can agree with, and that is that our students here in the San Ramon Valley deserve the best. They deserve the best class sizes where they're able to get their individual attention and receive creative spaces to learn. They deserve the best supports where they're able to have their counselors, their social workers, special ed ratios, teacher librarians, spaces where they're seen as individuals and are allowed to be able to express themselves. They also deserve the best teachers. And we know in looking at just our neighboring districts, really the only way to get the best teachers in this now national shortage is to have a competitive offer that makes the San Ramon Valley attractive. And I think back at why I came to the San Ramon Valley from where I was in San Leandro originally. And we need to look at our neighboring districts and seeing what they're doing and ensuring that we have the ability to show educators that this is the place where they want to work. That means that we have to have a competitive salary. It means we have to have competitive benefits. It also means that we have to have a positive partnership with management. And that's something that I think we've all been very committed in ensuring that that grows. But we also need to have a supportive community, a place where educators know that they are valued, respected, and that their professionalism is honored. We made the conscious decision as teachers to ensure to never lose sight of what our students need and ensuring that our students do get the best. We made this decision to ensure that our negotiations stayed focused on our students. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been able to be very successful this past year, is because we have a collective agreement that our students are the #1 priority. Our students, we were one of the few districts in this area to actively negotiate a safe return to school, consciously working so that our students would be safe and be able to get back onto our campuses. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, we were actually one of the first districts to bring our students back on campus, and we were only able to do that because of the partnerships that we have. We negotiated the safe, but we needed to wait for the legal, as someone previously mentioned, and we do continue to comply with what is legal, even though it turns our world and sometimes our negotiations upside down. I know that We don't always agree, that all of us have our thoughts and our opinions, but as long as we keep our students in our focus, we can never be wrong. And I think that's one of the things that I really want to challenge all of us, is to understand that while we have what we think is right, or what we think is best for our kids, really, we need to be listening to our kids. We need to be listening to what our kids need and understanding that as long as our students stay in our focus, those are truly the victors. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have anyone present from SEIU to speak this evening? Okay, thank you. I do have actually a couple of speaker cards on this item. They're both from Helen of Doherty Valley. So do we have two Helen of Doherty Valleys here? Well, I have two cards that say 9.2. Okay.
Sorry, President. I only gave you one card. I cannot be responsible for whatever somebody else tries to imposter as me. So I only give you one card. I will only take 3 minutes of your time. I won't take 6 minutes of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I want to respond to the president's comment. I have always great respect for teachers. I myself was a teacher when I was younger. And coming from the Taiwanese culture, we have tremendous respect for teachers. In fact, in our language, teachers means some are put together from two characters. One means somebody who is very seasoned and experienced, and then the other one is almost like your parents, your family. That's how close and how intimate we consider people who teach us and our children. However, whatever I have been hearing in the past meetings, I feel that you have cheapened the image of a teacher, because Mr. Rojenski in the last meeting said that when he is going to do the hiring for next year, he's not going to look at the qualifications or the resume of a teacher. He's just going to close his eyes and eeny, meeny, miny, mo. If the teacher has the right color, even better, he or she will be hired. If the teacher is having the right kind of sex, even better, he or she will be hired on the spot. Why do we bother to pay more for somebody who is born into a color, is choosing to have whatever kind of lifestyle they have? What is so, like, I don't know how then would you consider pay scale for someone's birth color and someone's preferred lifestyle. I don't understand that. You need to be honest with yourselves, because you yourself said that we're all role modeling for our students as we have this kind of meetings. I want you to know that you look very hypocritical, not only to the parents, but to the students. If you truly want them to have the best teachers, you need to focus on their qualifications, not on their skin color, not on their eye color, not on their whatever, not on their lifestyle. That's not what teachers do. They don't go out there and show me all day, show the students all day long, look, I'm going to teach you my skin color. Look, I'm going to teach you my lifestyle. No, they need to teach according to what is mandated for them to teach, which are standards by the state of California. So please be honest. We are all watching you. So are our students. Thank you.
Moving on to item 9.3, it's our student board member report. Run it, Batra.
Thank you. So for today's report, there's three overarching areas that I would like to cover. The first being the Student Senate, the second, just the general school environment over the past month. And then the third is the child nutrition planning, which primarily relates to school lunches. So first, the Student Senate has been operating on their own initiatives in their subcommittee groups. Primarily, we have the Student Voice Committee, which is working to get a board member on the Contra Costa Board of Education in line with the new AB 824 law, which has been passed by the California State Assembly. Apart from that, they have also began working on a participatory budgeting plan, which is undergoing a trial run with the California High School Library. And they are working to make sure that students are involved in the decision-making process at a high level in all sorts of formats along those lines. For our equity and in-person school committees, along with our other committee for mental health, we also have initiatives going on, for example, with Videos for Schoology, which we've been working with district officials with, specifically Chris George in the technology department. And then we have also been working on an anti-bullying video just to raise awareness and to sort of perpetuate a culture of safety and inclusivity. At our past meeting, we had a very constructive discussion in the Senate with Dr. Malloy about a variety of topics relating to what students are liking about the current school environment, what students could see as improvements, and what they might desire from the upcoming school year, whether it's next semester or whether it is just at the next school that they progress into from middle school to high school or into the next grade. So in particular, some of the comments which were agreed upon by a variety of different senators and which I've heard before just from talking to students at many school campuses in the past is standardizing the grading system where the rounding differs for the 89.5 to 90, which is the most popular instance of just an unstandard grading system from teacher to teacher or from class to class. And then additionally, making sure that elective courses and fine arts and other courses along those lines are really brought into the limelight and emphasized and not necessarily ignored just because they aren't required courses per se throughout the natural progression of the student. Additionally, in line with deep learning, students want more feedback about why they got a certain grade in a class or on an assignment. I know the district is really working towards making sure that students are learning deeply, understanding what they could be doing better. And we want to sort of distance ourselves away from a number or grade value for the person and really teach them how they can build upon their skills and improve what sort of knowledge that they've actually accumulated throughout their activities. Apart from that, we also want to make sure that all of our communication as a district to our student body is organized and is clear. So in line with that, just having email communications to students as well as parents, but also having communications via social media, for example, via Instagram or other external means, just so that students are able to easily access information about changes in technology, child nutrition, or other district-wide policies that have been implemented in recent weeks. In general, the high schools are organizing a Breaking Down the Walls group to raise mental health awareness and foster a stronger sense of community on their campuses. So from each school, there will be a group of kids that will get together, and I will be involved with this group starting January. So we should have students, I believe it's approximately 30 from each high school across the district. And then we would also be having 15 students from De La Salle and Carondelet High School each. Apart from that, there have also been increasing levels of stress due to academics around this time of year, especially with finals and the end of the semester coming up. This is more prominent at the high school level, so high schools are starting to bring about initiatives throughout their leadership departments and just by administration, for example, to have campus therapy dogs that students can go to during lunchtime, but also having other sorts of events just to be able to have groups studying for finals during support periods, during lunch and after school, and other events related to the holidays just to boost morale and keep students going for this final push of about the last week. Securely, there have been a couple of concerns. Students are having a little bit of difficulty accessing certain venues of information for some projects. But this is, since it's in such a preliminary phase, being worked through by the district technology department. And we do have ongoing discussions about making sure that Securely is able to operate seamlessly with students being able to always sort of safely access the internet and have uninterrupted access as long as they are sort of staying within the boundaries of what's necessary in the school environment. I met yesterday with Zeta Riker, the director of the Child Nutrition Department, as well as chefs from the district. So we are working to create a menu and just develop the access to food to be more equitable and exciting for students across all grade levels. So the engagement process, which will start in January, will include stakeholders from high schoolers, middle schoolers, and from parent groups. I'm going to work to recruit students for the engagement group along with the district child nutrition department, really focusing on creating a well-rounded group, not necessarily just those who are reaching out or who are involved in school lunches on a day-to-day basis, but those who have dietary restrictions, others who don't have dietary restrictions but don't like the food, others who do like the food, and people who do and don't participate in school lunches to understand maybe why they don't participate, and for others to understand the reasons that they do participate and why they may be excited about the plan. Additionally, they are building technology infrastructure with a new point of sale, which will be rolling out. It's currently in the development process, so it will be a bit of time until it gets here. But really making sure that there is a sort of like web platform, probably in the form of an app, where students can access the menu and understand what's being served with the dietary content. And then next year, even having some pre-ordering for high school, since there are such high student population numbers, and that can lead to very long lunch lines, it would be easier to have that pre-ordering system. So that should be something implemented for the next school year. So overall, I think that we are working in a pretty positive direction to make sure that the students are being heard and making the changes to make sure that their school experience is exciting, safe, and comfortable. And I look forward to the next semester. Thank you.
I want to thank you so very much for your report. And please, the next time you have the student senate together, please let them know how important their voice through you has been for this whole board. It's really, as we say it often, it's been just a delight to get real issue type of comments from you and from the school senate. We really look forward to your continued participation. I do have a speaker card on this item. Helen.
Helen of Doherty Valley here. Mr. Batra, thank you so much for your report. I want to piggyback on your advocacy for deep learning. There is a problem that I've been hearing, especially in the highest level of math in our school district. The young students who are coming up are lumped together with older students. And then in those high level math, the grading system is going according to the deep learning, and it becomes very communist. Let me explain to you what I heard. The students can possibly be getting perfect scores, but they will get a C because their group project is 25% of their grade. And how does group project work? It's not everyone's efforts together. It's the teacher who goes into a pile of the group project and then sort of just pull anyone. And then if the teacher happens to pull the least, weighted paper, then everyone's grade gets dropped. The students can have grades that are 1 to 2 letter grades below their actual level. This is not equity learning. This is communist learning. This is to make sure people who are, there really help people who are on the bottom. And if the people who are on the bottom cannot be helped, it's still the people on the top's fault. This is not the way education should be. I am for group team projects. I myself have gone through many, many effective ways of teamwork and group learning. However, for students as young as K through 12 to be dinged for this kind of quote unquote deep learning is very, very wrong. You're teaching the students that life is never going to be fair, And no matter how hard I work, I can never get the grade that I deserve. And I will just, do whatever. I hope that you will please, advocate for those students who demand explanations and answers from the school district so they can, better come up with what is deep learning in terms of grade. Thank you.
Moving on to item 10.0, we have action items and public hearings. Item 10.1 is public disclosure of the major provisions of the 2020, 2021, and 21-22 Seminole Valley Education Association agreement in accordance with the requirements of AB 1200, AB 2756, and Government Code 3547. I have one speaker card on this item, Matthew Hoffman.
There's a few items where to speak on this, and so I don't know if this applies, but this, I was interested in hearing President Finko's talking on the benefits of getting this salary increase. She specifically noted class sizes, creative spaces, teacher librarians, and areas for students to explore their true selves, I guess, such as rainbow rooms or prism clubs and things of that nature. And it was interesting to me because these are all items, especially at the elementary school level, that are 100% funded by parents. At our school site, I know at Sycamore, the rainbow room is 100% funded by parents. The teacher librarian isn't 100% funded by parents, but it's greatly funded by parents. The creative spaces, such as the maker spaces or any of the other creative tools that some of the science teachers are using, are from parent donations. And the class size issues in terms of having para educators at the elementary school level, again, are all funded by parent donations and not through the process of this board. So then we look at, well, what are we doing? Looking at this proposal, and especially the concerns from the county, make us ask some serious questions of the timing of this and what the consequences are to the learning environment that we have set up. Prior, the President Finko at another meeting talked about everything I learned in kindergarten, which again, I found ironic because kindergarten was taken away for thousands of kids in this area. So I was thinking about that metaphor, and I was thinking about another child story and how a character spoke for the trees. And then he was talking about how there was a finite resource that was being abused, and that unless something was done by people in charge, that finite resource was going to be gone. These things that the association president talked about as being the most important, the parent donations are a finite resource. And then coming up with a proposal like this that more or less holds future parcel tax hostage, saying now to the community, well, now you're going to have to pass this tax because we've already earmarked it for these salary things that we can't afford. And if you guys don't pass the tax, then insolvency is on you as a community and not this board for doing their fiscal responsibility. I encourage you guys all to think about what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Item 10.2 is actual consideration of approval of the tentative agreement between the Seminole Valley Unified School District and the Seminole Valley Education Association for the 2020, 2021, and 2021-22 school years. We'll start with Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, President Mintz, and I'll just provide a brief comment before sending this over to Assistant Superintendent Rodzinski. And I just want to echo the fact that this is an important proposal that's been brought to you tonight. From a staff perspective, we are grateful to the very significant and collaborative work that has gone on between our teams, as we heard from President Finko. It is important for us to understand the complexity of the situation that we're in financially. And tonight, because there are actually two reports that, because they've come on the same night, they need to speak to each other. And so the hope would be that by the end of this board meeting, since you have seen the package, you understand how they speak to each other, but that our community has also helped to understand the circumstances. So we are, as I said, excited about this because we know that our staff is the most important resource for our students. And we are grateful to our parents and our community for partnering with our staff and with us to provide the best education possible. I'll have more comments to make when we're speaking about the actual first interim report. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent for the more specific pieces related to this agenda item.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. So as indicated in the materials, the district and Servia met at the bargaining table beginning on October 18th and reaching tentative agreement on November 5th. That's a 3-week period of time. During that period of time, we met and conducted 4 bargaining sessions. Both teams were fully committed to productive and expeditious negotiations and to bringing the process to closure successfully and in a manner that reflected the district's strategic plan and the new strategic directions. We are extremely proud, as Dr. Malloy mentioned, of what was accomplished at the table, to accomplish not just 1, but 2 reopener years, the 2021 and 21-22 years of negotiations in such a short period of time is a very significant accomplishment. We want to thank the members of the Servia bargaining team, who I'll mention shortly, as well as the district's bargaining team, whose names I'll mention shortly as well. Were it not for the leadership of the individuals who served on those teams, and the outstanding leadership of Laura Finko, the new president of Servia, the terrific work and leadership provided at the bargaining table on the Servia side by co-chairs Didi Giudice and John Vespi, and on the district side by lead negotiator and spokesperson, executive director of human resources, Melanie Jones. We would not have been able to bring about this result in this amount of time to you. So I want to proudly recommend to the board this evening that this tentative agreement be approved so that it can be implemented forthwith. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Maczynski. Members of the board, are there any questions that you have or comments prior to asking for motion? Not seeing any. Can I have a motion? Oh, okay, go ahead.
make a
I wasn't
comment,
sure
sorry.
if you were getting ready or.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to I guess ask a question and kind of make a comment. So I know in the negotiation process we had the opportunity to look at other districts around us to compare compensation, and I think that that's some information that might be valuable to our community to find out, in fact, how we relate to our surrounding districts. You know, with a shortage in staff, it's important for us to remain competitive. I know in the past we have been considered a destination district, both for students and families, but also for teachers. And part of that is the compensation package. And so I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit to how we compare.
Sure. Thank you, Trustee Bratt. So, you know, for a number of years, it was very common knowledge that San Ramon Valley's compensation and health and welfare benefits package was top of the heap, and it had been so for many, many years, and had been known as a district for offering such compensation. We refer to as total compensation. But as we know, a number of years ago, the state decided to change the mechanism used to allocate funding to school districts, where some districts receive significantly more revenues from the state government than other districts. And we've talked a number of times in this venue about the fact that San Ramon Valley is among the lowest as far as receipt of revenues by the state. So what we have noted over time, and specifically since the implementation of the LCFF in or around 2013, 2012, 2013, is that other districts have been catching up. And what was a very obvious competitive edge for a number of years has started to fade away as districts have used their increased and in many cases significantly greater sources of revenue to apply them to salary and benefits. So in order to maintain a competitive edge, we absolutely do look at districts, particularly regional districts in Contra Costa County and in Alameda County, to constantly assess how we are comparing to others. Because in an environment of shortage and in an environment like this year, where we've talked about there are so many vacancies and it's been so hard to hire, and that appears to be a reality for at least the foreseeable future, we need to do the very best that we can do in terms of deploying resources to recruiting, hiring, and retaining the very best talent that we can to work with our students in the classroom. At this point, this settlement, as applied to 2021 and 2021-22, will allow us to maintain a reasonable competitive edge among districts in our region. But it is no longer what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Bratt and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out vote. Student Board Member Bacha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
And again, Ms. Rudzinski, members of your team and the SRVUSD team have our appreciation for not just coming to an agreement, but the approach to coming to an agreement, working together for, and recognizing the types of limitations that we're working under to try to come up with the best possible alternative that will allow us to continue to meet our budget, as we'll be hearing about with our first interim report, but also, for the retention as well as opportunity to attract the best possible workforce that we can.
Thank you, President Mintz.
No, I took care of all 10.2s. She put down 10.4, 10.5. I'm sorry. So,
She made a mistake. So
okay, please, do you want to step up? No problem.
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can on this, but I do think it's an important topic that we're talking about. I think our teachers are super important, critical to our kids, and a valuable asset in our community. That being said, I did have an opportunity to review the letter that went out from Contra Costa County Office of Education with the big concern about the deficit spending we're going into, looking at a negative impact of $18.8 million over the next 3 years. We teach our kids better than this in high school econ, and any private sector business cannot submit a budget that's not balanced. I think there's work to be done, and I have faith that our board can do some critical thinking and looking at that. I think our teachers deserve to be compensated well. I think that when we look at our budgets, we need to balance what these pension plans are, because sometimes they're crippling budgets, city budgets, school district budgets. So maybe we need to look at taking some from here to go over here to balance this and stay fiscally responsible as a school district. When our assistant superintendent's addressing how much less funding our district is getting, I've given a lot of speeches over the years to parents and PTAs about Title I funding. So yes, school districts that are as wealthy as ours, we don't get those. But this room full of parents, we do all the fundraising to backfill that already. To go back and ask the public to raise our taxes again because we're not balancing our budget, that's like kicking your donors in the teeth, right? I mean, our families are the ones who are making up that deficit there already for the Title I funds. My understanding, and I don't know if I'm correct on this, so please educate me, and if I'm not, is that these teachers' increases have a mandatory salary increase for other not administrative staff, but perhaps supervisory staff that's attached to it automatically. If so, that doesn't seem like maybe this is the right time to be structuring that this way, especially with the pandemic, with declining enrollment and real critical details that we need to think about for our funding for our schools. So I hope that you guys will just do some research on that. think about what is best for our families and constituents who are trying to live here in a very expensive place already, but with these great schools. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. And we'll move on then to item 10.3, which is consideration of acceptance of the 2021-22 first interim financial report, which then deals directly with the comments that Ms. Plummer you just made. Okay, we have Mr. Hillman is going to provide us our presentation on the first interim report.
Good evening, President Mintz, newly President Mintz, and fellow trustees, staff, community. I'm happy to present this year's first interim report for the 21-22 fiscal year. There's a pretty detailed cover sheet that goes through a lot of the details in the board packet. I'll make some references in my presentation to other pages in the packet, and I've attempted to summarize it here in some PowerPoint slides. I think we know that some of the detailed spreadsheets don't translate all that well to PowerPoint. So I'll step you through it and try to explain how I'm showing it on the screen, and then give people the reference point in the packet if they'd like to see the detail, because there's lots of detail. If you're into detail, this is a good topic. So the purpose, process, and result of the first interim report is essentially the following. The purpose of this report is to provide the board and the public with an evaluation of the district's financial position at this moment in time. This is the first of two required reports that we must do per law. And it's really part of the checks and balances systems that we have in place on an ongoing basis to make sure that the finances are being reviewed regularly, and also that it is done in a public way so that everyone can see what's going on, and that the any transfers, any expenditures, any new revenues can all be reviewed by anyone who is interested. The process for first interim is pretty straightforward. The Board of Education self-certifies this report as either one of three options: positive, qualified, or negative. A positive certification by the trustees basically means that the district can meet its financial obligations as we know them today for the current year and 2 more years. A qualified certification would mean that we can meet it this year, but one of the next 2 years we may fall short. And then a negative certification would mean we can't meet it this year, or we can't meet it next year. So that's a more imminent situation. The result of the certification today, the next step would be after your adoption, it goes to the County Office of Education. They review this report and the accompanying documents. They certify it. Most often they will agree with us and the conclusion that you have come to, and then they send the report and all the documents to Sacramento. CDE gets to see it, it gets filed, and then we go on and do this all over again in a couple of months. So the timeline looks like this. This is where we are in the process right now. You can see a little red arrow. We are at first interim. It covers the months through October 31st from the beginning of the fiscal year. And then you can see second interim. I'll make some references to that in just a minute. But second interim covers 3 more months. We get through January at that point. And there's a pretty important event that happens every January that I'll get into that really informs second interim. And I'll make some comments about that in a second. So this slide here is trying to summarize. As I mentioned, there's a lot of detail in the report, but the slide is attempting to show all of our anticipated revenues, both restricted and unrestricted amounts combined into each year. And the itemized total can be seen beginning on page 55 of the board packet if you're into that. A couple of assumptions I want to mention out of the gate is that this multi-year projection, the MYP, was created using data points from the School Services of California dartboard. This is a pretty industry standard dartboard. It's basically a giant table with a bunch of facts and figures on it. We use it, so do most of the other, if not all 1,000 school districts, public ones in the state of California. And it assumes at this moment that there will be a COLA in the 22-23 school year of 2.48 and another COLA in 23-24 of 3.11. I'm going to come back to that COLA assumption a little bit later, but I just wanted to let you know that those are the numbers that we've used and put into the formulas that yield a lot of the results that you see here. As you can see from the numbers, the LCFF revenue, our local control funding formula revenue, drops down from the current year of 288 million and change down to 278 million, and then it comes back up a little bit, 284 million. It's a friendly reminder that we are funded by the number of students we have enrolled, those actually attending of that enrollment number. And it's also worth mentioning that the state of California, to help districts get through the pandemic, basically tagged the enrollment of the 2019-2020 school year as a way to help districts get through if they were declining enrollment. We are in declining enrollment. We have been for several years, and we are definitely not alone in this boat. Of the 1,000 school districts in the state of California, there are at least over 50% that are declining. And basically, by the time next year rolls around, I think the estimate is that about 3/4 of them will be declining enrollment. That's essentially driven by a statewide population that's declining, and there's some reasons for that that we don't need to get into tonight. But the reality is that statewide, state-to-state migration, along with a lower birth rate, is essentially the two main drivers of that. This is a trend that isn't new. It hasn't come about in the last 2 years or 4 years. It's been an ongoing trend for over a decade. So LCFF revenue, you can see there, drops about $9.7 million. That is because the state has made it clear that this is the last year that they're going to hold our revenue, our funding, at the 1920 level. So for us, as you go through the MYP, that's a drop of about 850 students, what we were receiving in funding in 1920, to what we can expect to receive in 22-23. So that right there, just by itself, if you just multiply that by $10,000 a student, which is a very rough average, and doesn't include any other monies that we get for lottery money and things like that, that's already $8 million, $8.5 million. So you can see where most of the 9.6 is coming from. It's from that drop. This was anticipated. We knew that the state could do this and that they wouldn't extend it. And so we have to put into the assumption that the state isn't going to do anything else to help us in this front. We have to assume that we have to live by the students who are attending this year. And so that's what's in that first number. That's why you see the drop. On the federal revenues line there, the majority of the federal revenues, if not all of them, are restricted. They're for incredibly specific purposes. Big dollar amounts there that you'd see if you broke down the line would be $6.2 million for special education funding, about a combined $1.75 million, 1.74 for Titles I, Titles II, and Title III funding. And then there's a all other category that you'll see in the detailed report. And about 13 million of that covers the COVID-related grants, like the expanded learning opportunities, the ESSER monies, things like that. You can see that the federal money drops off, 21.8 million down to 6 and down to 6. So basically, all of the one-time monies that we've received are going to go away. We'll receive them this year, and this is it. Once they're gone, they're gone. They're one-time dollars. They have to be spent on a specific timeline. But that's the major reason why you see a 21.8 million drop down to 6.7. It's just the money we've received this year, and we don't expect to see it in the future. The other state line here, other state revenue, is a similar situation. There is a big chunk of this money here, $23.2 million is for the special ed master plan. That's from the state to implement our special education master plan. There's also some lottery money in there for 6.4 million and mandated cost reimbursement for 1.3. And then again, you'll see a total, if you go into the detail, about $28.7 million of all other state categories. A big chunk of this is $14.3 million for STRS contributions. So just as a friendly reminder to the public, the state makes STRS contributions on behalf of our certificated employees, but they don't just give it directly to the employee. We have to book that revenue. It doesn't come to us. It goes directly to the employee at the state level, but we have to put it somewhere on our accounting. So it's essentially on our balance sheet and then off of our balance sheet. So when you see this big chunk of money sitting under other state revenue, half of it is for that STRS contribution because we have to book it. It's an accounting thing. We don't actually get the cash. So if you see that, that's what that is. Higher state and federal revenues due to COVID-19 funds, I mentioned that. I also mentioned, and I'm going to say it again, they're one time. So in the out years, they're gone or they decrease. Other local line in revenues includes things like our parcel tax donation from our community of almost $7 million at 6.9, leases, rentals, some interest, and then other local is 15.5 million, which is mostly local donations. Transfers in, that line there, the amount of $8.2 million in 23-24. I want to highlight this for just a second. In the third year, as I said, we anticipated that we would have lower enrollment now than we did 2 years ago. And so the board, with a recommendation from staff, you voted to set aside some dollars in Fund 40. And so on an item that was voted on during consent this evening, the item was to essentially unreserve dollars from Fund 40, transfer them into Fund 1. That's where it pops up in the third year. It was a $4 million declining enrollment reserve. That has now been unencumbered, for lack of a better term, unreserved, and transferred over. You took that action during consent this evening. It shows up in the MYP here. This helps us meet our balance of the third year. So I'm going to mention this and go back to 10.1 for just a second and tie it all together, as John mentioned. In 10.1, you saw the letter from the county, and they had two major concerns. One was that we weren't meeting the state required reserve of 3% in the third year. That's the last column here on the right. Transferring this money in helps with that, and we do meet our reserve in the third year. So what the county asked us to do by second interim, March 15th, we have already done one of the two items tonight. So I just wanted to point that out. Moving on to the expenditure area here, the last half of this slide here. I wanted to point out something that someone may pick up on. The certificated salaries are decreasing from 164 million and change down to 154 million and change. There's two key reasons for that. You've been hearing me talk about declining enrollment. Most of our certificated staff are hired based upon ratios. As we have fewer students, that necessitates fewer certificated staff. If you look at the classified, however, it drops down, but then it goes back up in the third year. Why is that? Well, there's a small adjustment we'll be making this year, again, for declining enrollment and things like that. But all of the current year assumptions around which classified staff are staying or going are based upon adjustments that we've made by looking at the actual payroll for the first 5 months of the school year. In the out years, classified staff are not tied to, so without any other moves of the board and actual decisions to say we're going to increase this or decrease that, the assumption for the MYP is that we hold it static until an actual action is taken by the board. Because at this point, a drop in enrollment doesn't necessitate a drop in classified salary. So that's why you see it go down and go back up again. The going back up is the year-over-year cost that it takes to take all of our existing people on the salary schedule and advance them the next year. Those costs are built into that jump from 50, it's not a jump, but 53.7 up to 54.2, so $500,000 more. Employee benefits, this is an easy one. They're more expensive, so they're going to keep getting more expensive. Jumping down to capital, no, not capital outlay, sorry, other outgo. This is always a great term because people are like, what the heck is other outgo? I think that the board knows this and the community may not. There are certain students that are our residents who are served by the County Office of Education. This is a payment to the Office of Education, County Office of Education, to serve those students. So it's out here. This is this year's number. We just carry it forward based upon what we guess at this point. And it is more of a guess because the services that those students are receiving are typically students with special needs, and that's going to fluctuate from year to year. Transfers out. This was asked at a previous board meeting about transfers out. Is that students? Has nothing to do with students. This transfers out is a payment that we make from the general fund to Fund 40, where we hold on to it so that we can make the debt service payment on the solar loans that were used to put in solar and save electricity cost avoidance. So we have to take that money out each year, and that's what you're seeing here, that $2.7 million. So just to recap, revenues. New funding over the last 21 months from the federal and the state. 16 new funding programs, most of it's restricted, all of it's one time. In 22-23, we will be funded at the ADA rate from this year, 21-22. Fewer students results in less funding. Enrollment projections, I'm going to go to that in just a second. I'm going to show you where we've been and where we're headed. On the expenditure side, continued upward pressure from things like health and welfare costs, pension costs, inflation increases. All this isn't a permanent thing. I'll come back to that. And certificated staffing will adjust to ADA, as I mentioned. So let me pick two things out of here and I'll go to the next slide. Pension costs. pension costs are not determined by us. They are partially paid by the district, they are partially paid by the state, and they are partially paid by the employee. Everyone contributes. But the percentage that we pay on every dollar that an employee earns isn't determined by us. It's STRS for certificated and it's PERS for classified. And so those costs are rising because those boards have determined that their actuarial study, they can't pay for all the people that are going to retire. And when they made that commitment back, I don't even know when, 80s or something like that, 1980s, maybe even earlier, they said, okay, well, when we want to figure out how much more money we need, we're going to have the districts pay for this. It was a state commitment paid for by the districts now. So we are responsible for a promise that the state made. And they've helped us out in the last couple of years in a couple of areas. Sometimes they've given us some one-time money to help in that year towards pensions so that it doesn't have to come out of our general fund. But unfortunately, this is something that will continue for some time. The percentages are supposed to top out in the next couple of years, I believe. But it's still going to be the district picking up something close to 20% on some of the employee groups. So I just wanted to point that one out. And then the inflation thing for just a second. Latest economic forecasts are showing that California is recovering faster than the rest of the country. Just to give you a couple of benchmark points on this, unemployment, we only have about, I think, 4 more million jobs to recover from when the pandemic started. So this is an expenditure piece right now. Everyone's experiencing inflation. We, in the community, everyone's feeling that. So are districts. It's a different indicator. We don't use the consumer price index because we're not a consumer. We use something different for government. But the point is that we're feeling it too, shortages, supply chain issues. Some of this inflation increase is predicted to alleviate itself next fiscal, or I should say calendar year, by about summer or so is what they're thinking. It's going to start to ease. It's not going to go away. And obviously this will be greatly determined by what the Federal Reserve does at the national level. So we'll just have to watch this one. But those are baked into the MYP that I showed you on the previous slide, rising costs. Let me go back over to enrollment projections. So these are color-coded simply to show the past, the present, and the future. On the far left-hand side, 2018-19, you can see that we clocked in with 31,000, almost 32,000 students. And then you can see the star shows where we are now. That's 21, 22. And then the darker green ones, or in this case, bright green because of the screen, sorry about that. You can see the projection. This projection is from our demographer, Davis Demographics. And I would like to highlight that this is resident enrollment projections. This is not who attends. This is who lives here. So our demographer takes a look at all of the homes that we have in the area. They look at birth rates of the county that they get from the Department of Finance, and they help us predict where our enrollment is headed. They do this on an annual basis. This is a summary of their 30-some-odd page packet. And I just wanted to highlight 2 things. One, you can see the downward trend. And so this isn't going to be necessarily our number. Our number this year is not 29,942 because we have more students attending than we have living. And that's okay because some kids transfer out and some transfer in. So our net balance this year is somewhere around 30,100. But you can see the downward trend. The other thing I wanted to point out is that for the ongoing projection studies, they're going to continue to break out the transitional kindergarten grade level, TK. The reason for that is because over the next, this projection cycle, the next 6-7 years, you can see that the TK number is growing, that little orange bar at the top. And I wanted to highlight that here for you because the state has made a decision to go to universal TK. There's a presentation on it later. But those projections are going to buoy our declining enrollment a little bit for the next couple of years. You can see that the yellow line flattens a little, and then you get to 26, 27. That's the year that UTK, universal TK, gets fully implemented, and you can see it starts to drop off a little bit more. Interestingly enough, students that are born, children I should say, pardon me, children born in the year 2022 will start TK at the last year of implementation, 26, 27. So that'll be fun to watch and see how it all pans out. But this is where we think, based on the demographer, looking at our local data by zip code, you can kind of see where this is headed, and then we will make adjustments from there. So this is the detail behind our declining enrollment. I wanted to present it here in case anyone had questions when we get done. The back half of the MYP, the place that most people like to go to and look at, is the general fund balance. So this slide attempts to summarize how the general fund ending fund balance, how it looks over the 3-year MYP. Same set of years, just looking at a slightly different thing. It's down the page in the detailed report. Let me explain a couple of quick things on here. The components of the ending fund balance. This year, we expect the ending fund balance to be 39 million and change. The components non-spendable, that makes up things like our revolving cash accounts and the stores, the value of the things we have in the warehouse, and some prepaid items. Like, for instance, we've ordered it, but we haven't received it, so you can't accrue it. Anyway, again, more accounting stuff that you probably don't care about. The legally restricted number here, 7.2 million, covers things like our fund for regular routine maintenance, our maintenance department, that gets logged here. Where the restricted portion of our lottery money goes here, which is for instructional materials. And then some school site donations, and 2 of the COVID grants are in this line, the $7.2 million number. The assigned category, I want to spend a little time on this just to show you what's happening here. Because of the timing of this year's tentative agreement with one of our bargaining units, we couldn't show the financial effect of that settlement on the expenditure section in this presentation. To do so would have been to be presumptuous in that you were going to approve it no matter what. And we can't presume that. So normally, if a TA or something else around salaries and benefits was increased, you would have seen an increase on this slide. The expenditures for certificated classified employee benefits would go up. But we couldn't do that because you hadn't moved on the TA yet, on the tentative agreement. So what we did is we put it here under an assigned category, saying that the TA was signed by both district staff and the bargaining unit. The board had not taken action. So we can't use this money for something else. We have to reserve it. Because if you vote yes, which you just did, we're going to take the dollar amount of that contract and move it up to the expenditure lines and benefit lines that you will see at second interim. You'll see that in March reflected. So that's what the assigned number is there. And I want to make sure you understand that's where it's reflected. We don't have any money in the next 3 years that's undesignated or unappropriated. That's not always been the case. We've always had maybe a little bit of money there, but not large dollars typically. And then people have been asking or talking about the county's letter in regard to the 3rd year and meeting the minimum reserve. So I had to do an extra line here to show this because the reserve is simply a math problem of how much money did you expend and what's 3% of that. That's all it is. So this year, I think it's $409 million we're projected to spend. So what's 3% of that? You can see it here under reserve for economic uncertainty, 12.2 million. That sits in a different fund. It's called Fund 17. I want to list it here so you can see we're holding 3%, and it differs each year because it's based on our expenditures. So as our expenditures go down next year, so does the 3% reserve. And then you heard me earlier mention the declining enrollment reserve that we knew was going to happen, and so we set some money aside. So about $5 million several years ago, we used some of it. We're using the balance of it, not this year, not next year, but in 23-24. So that's why it goes from 4.1, stays 4.1, and then goes to 0. We're going to move that money in and use it so that we meet the minimum reserve of 3% in the 3rd year. So if you look at the reserve percentages underneath, I don't mean to confuse anyone, but if you just take the Fund 17 economic uncertainty and you add in the Fund 17 assigned, the 2 items right above it, it's a 4% reserve this year, 4.1 next year, exactly 3% in the 3rd year. If you take a different slice of the pie and you look at Fund 17 and you add in the Fund 1 assigned that I talked about, the 30.9 million, you can see that it inflates the number. It's a bigger number, so it's a bigger percentage. But remember that now that you've taken action on the tentative agreement, we need to move dollars out of that 30.9 up to the expenditure line. That changes the percentage. And if I didn't add this last reserve percentage, Fund 17, Fund 1 assigned, after it's spent, I'd be giving you, I don't want to say a false representation, but it wouldn't be accurate to say that our reserve this year is 10.5%. Sorry, it's not 10.5%. You just took action. We've got to move some money around. You'll see it in second interim, but the ongoing reserve with all of the funds will be 8.48% this year. And I need to be very clear about that so that you guys know that we've accounted for it. Next year, 5.04%, and in the third year, 3.06%. Yes, Rachel.
Um,
Sorry, Trustee Hurd.
that's okay. That assigned 30 or the effect of the agreement, does that total number account for the same raise package going to all employees, or is that just the Servia piece that we just approved?
We anticipated that there would be more dollars needed for our negotiations with all of the bargaining units. So there is money set aside in the 30.9 million to do just that.
That last line, reserve percentage after it's spent, is really the status that we're used to looking at.
Correct.
Okay.
That is the apples to apples reserve amount percentage that this board is used to seeing in this type of presentation. You're welcome. Any other questions from trustees? Sorry about that, Trustee Hurd. Before I leave this slide. Okay. So a review of that slide just very quickly. We have a required reserve of 3%. The reserve for economic uncertainty for this district lives in Fund 17. If you want to find it, that's where it is. I'm happy to show anyone who would like to see where's Fund 17. I have the paperwork. The assigned categories in the General Fund 01 include funds for negotiated settlements. We have a convergence of several variables that will affect our MYP over the next couple of years. The first one being ADA funding, moving from the 1920 level to 21-22 level. I've mentioned that. The ongoing declining enrollment. These are separate. I just want to pause for a second. ADA funding switching from what it was to what it is this year to fund next year is one item. But if we continue to decline as projected, that is a separate variable we have to continue to deal with. And then the third thing is program and staffing decisions coming to fruition in this year. So as an example, we, the board and the group of trustees made a decision several years ago to fund some bridge program items with one-time money. This is the last year that one-time money exists. Most of those items continue on, but the funding doesn't. So that makes the structural deficit a little bit bigger starting next year. So it's a combination of things all coming to a head in next year, 22, 21, no, 22, 23, sorry. Too many twos, we need to get to a 3-digit here pretty quick, otherwise I think we're gonna lose our minds. So, and then the assigned amounts are one-time dollars. I would like to reiterate that on the MYP. Once we spend them, they are gone. So one thing I would like to say, and none of this is a part of our MYP. So this goes back to what we're hearing from economists about what to expect next fiscal year and calendar year, what we're hearing from the Legislative Analyst's Office, the LAO, and other agencies. State tax revenues are higher than predicted. And we're not talking about just up by a few percentages. We're talking about whatever their percentage increase was, it's 30% above that. So at this point, we know from our dealings and our work that the state is very aware of this ADA funding cliff, that most districts will be affected by the snap of 1920 funding moving to this year for next year. And so they're trying to come up with a solution. We don't know what it's going to be, but we didn't make any assumptions about what they're to decide in our MYP. So if they decide to do something that benefits us, that will make the MYP look better. The declining population in school enrollment, again, this is a statewide situation. This is not just about us. They do expect that the declining population situation to level out after 2022. The state's overall population will continue to decline, but by less than 1% year over year. Right now, it's bigger than that. And so everybody's feeling it. So in summary, we have work to do. We do need to match our expenditures to our revenues. We don't want to shy away from that or not talk about it. In order to know how much we need to match our expenditures to our revenues, the governor's budget in the beginning of January will be very, very important. So that's that event that I said at the very beginning of the presentation. We start to understand what the governor's thinking and his staff are thinking about how to help schools, among a bunch of other things, of course, across the state budget. And then between January and May, the legislature and the governor start to talk, maybe fight, I don't know, but they're talking to try to figure out the state budget. And then we get a revise of the budget, the governor's budget in May, and we use those assumptions to build our budget for next school year. So we'll keep you apprised of all of those things. This is just a timeline. And what's interesting to me on this that I'll just point out is that you'll notice I highlighted in blue what the district needs to do, and the other things are what the state is doing. You can notice that they don't line up. And so unfortunately, because of the state's budget process and when it falls, the governor puts out his proposal in mid-January. We have second interim due on March 15th, which is essentially our version of whatever he proposed in January. And if you remember the last 2 years, what he proposes in January to what we actually get in May, or what we really get in June, but what he revises in May, changed. In 2020, it changed drastically because of COVID. So that's one thing that doesn't line up. The other thing that doesn't line up is when he gives us the revised budget in May, we tweak our numbers and we have to adopt our budget in June before the state's adopted their budget. Unfortunately, it's just a structural mismatch. There's nothing we can do about it. So we have to go forward with the best information we can get from the state to make the best decisions we can make here locally. And then, as you can see, we'll make adjustments as needed. We'll come back to you with a 45-day revise after the school year starts, and we'll update you each month as needed to make the adjustments, just like we're doing this year. We continually update and revise anything with regard to revenue and expenditures as we progress through the school year. So that's the first interim report. And for concluding remarks, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, Danny. And I'll be very brief because I think you have covered all the points very, very importantly. The concluding remarks I'd like to make is you as a board, and certainly in the time I've been here with you, know that we have a revenue challenge. We've stated that publicly. That's the reason why you directed our work called Access to Excellence. And I'm putting that out there because the complexity of this situation is one that we need to help our community understand clearly and deeply, that we engage our community widely to gain insights, and that we get to a better place. Because it's not just one issue over another or versus another. Let me be very specific. Danny's been very clear about each year, the state provides something we weren't expecting. We've actually looked back year over year, and there are multiple millions that come, unfortunately, not always at the right time. Secondly, this report shows that by our county standard, we are where we need to be. It's tight, and we don't want to underestimate that, but it is absolutely within where we need to be. The revenue challenge is the structural deficit, and that's where Access to Excellence comes in. Nobody that I've talked to argues with the counseling ratios that were improved, for example, through the bridge that you approved working with our union colleagues years ago. And they don't want to lose that resource across our community, nor would I. When you compare our resources, which we are, and we'll be bringing this into our community through that Access to Excellence process in January, February, and March, we don't have extravagant resources when you look at class size, when you look at counseling ratios, when you look at nurses, and so forth. So when you look at our resources in relationship to all of those around us, we have to think deeply. Advocacy, even though I know it's been challenged in the past, there's a different context that I've learned about. I'm guessing you have as well. All across the state, one-time funding is not helping us. You cannot plan, you cannot budget, you cannot make hard decisions. Ongoing funding is necessary. It actually unites all 1,000 districts, whether you serve a more affluent community, whether you have access to revenues, or whether you are serving a community with socioeconomic challenges. That is a clear message that's coming from every corner, and I believe that we need to continue to share that so that there is ongoing funds. Secondly, it's not just about a parcel tax or just about the amazing generosity of our community as it relates to our foundation and the individual fundraising that goes on at schools. The challenge is it doesn't allow us to have one approach across our district to what each of our kids will have access to. So what that process is going to basically attempt is to be as creative as possible regarding advocacy and revenue generation, focusing on what our community has already told us our kids deserve. And as I said, I'm going to repeat it. What we are asking for does not put us in an extravagant spot compared to the districts around us. Our human resources, I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again, our teachers, our staff members are the most important resource. And it's important for us as a staff bringing this to you to be as clear as we can that there is a need that our community has to embrace as collectively, and I hope with as much unity as possible. Because at this point, it, as Danny said, it's not just us, but we're at a situation now where I'm hopeful, because when we look at what emerged as our community's desire for our students, when you look at the counseling supports, when you look at the class sizes, when you look at the access to arts, when you look at the access to technology for all 30,000 students, regardless of how much money can be raised in a particular community, that is something that most people that I speak to agree with. The challenge is, how do we support that? And we have to look as creatively and as critically as we can. And I'm hoping that that's what emerges for us between January and June of this coming year. So thank you for your attention to a very complex report. Thank you to our senior business official, I can say that tonight, for the first time in public since your appointment last meeting. And we turn it over to you for your discussion and your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. And first, Danny, thank you very much for your very clear and concise report on the first interim. It's a lot of information. There is a lot of complexity to it. And there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of unknowns, as Dr. Malloy has helped clarify as well, in terms of everything going on at the state level or not going on at the state level. I do have a speaker card on this item, but first let me ask if there are any questions of clarification from the board to ask of Mr. Hillman before we get to the speaker card. Laura?
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that the state is looking to not hold harmless ADA for 21-22, so that will decide the funding for 22-23. When I look at my 4 kids and the days that they've missed this year because of, I'm assuming it's a state mandate, that when a child has 2 symptoms that reflect what could potentially be COVID, they have to remain at home until they have a positive test or a negative test, until they have test and a negative test. And while now we have rapid testing, the first several months we didn't. And so it was 3 or 4 days that they missed of school. So, I look at that average of days missed relative to previous years, and it is probably 300% more of the days that they would normally miss in a year. So when I look at the state then looking at those numbers, they don't, in my mind, it's really hard for me, I guess, to wrap my brain around the fact that how can that really reflect the ADA that we will see next year, assuming that COVID is in a different place than it is this year. Has anyone heard any chatter at the state level about like really looking at this and the fact that it really doesn't make sense and we're still this year living in COVID, and so holding those ADA numbers for 22-23 just is not cool.
Yes. So there's a couple of things that are brewing on this topic, and there's a lot of advocacy happening on behalf of schools from organizations like FCMAT, the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, which is actually an organization, totally nonprofit. It's actually created by EdCode, but the CEO, Michael Fine, I believe went to the Education Committee or the Budget Committee, I can't remember which, recently, and talked about, instead of allowing a district to basically continue on for another year of 1920 funding for next school year, because that just kind of kicks the can down the road, is rather to look at something like a 3-year average, which would be what they're calling more of a soft landing. So you would decrease in your funding, but it wouldn't hit you after being stagnant at a funding level for 3 years, and then all of a sudden being dropped to here and then incrementally going down. So that's one topic that's being discussed, but that's a solution that's being discussed. But the topic that you bring up about how can the state fund districts during a time when kids are still missing school is absolutely been raised. And they're trying to problem solve that very thing, especially given we don't have an end date. It's not as if we know when COVID is going to be done or when it will stop affecting students and their attendance. So given all of those and linking it together to what Dr. Malloy was talking about earlier, they are aware of it. They're trying to come up with solutions to do it. And to your point, one-time funds is not the solution. So a hold harmless, extending it for another year is essentially like a one-time thing, a one-time fix. They're trying to come up with something that's a little bit more lasting that would help all districts that are declining enrollment, regardless of the reason, COVID or otherwise. So that's one suggestion that's been raised. I'm hearing it has some traction, but we'll see what comes out of the governor's, because that'll be the best indication of where they're thinking when he releases his budget in beginning of June or January.
And an additional comment, because I'm guessing, Trustee Bratt, many in our community might not know the distinction between enrollment and attendance. Enrollment means we have 30,000 kids, we're funded for 30,000 kids. ADA means that we are actually audited to how many kids are in school on a particular day. And because of even though the San Ramon Valley Unified School District has a great ADA because our kids come to school, and frankly, our calendar that we approve is adjusted so that that ADA is at the highest number it can be. The COVID crisis has impacted that greatly. So that discussion around attendance versus ADA versus enrollment is also happening across the state. And it's part of this discussion, which is why there is, I think, effective room for advocacy at this point, because clearly our state is announcing large numbers in terms of revenues. They're not yet announcing how they're going to use those revenues. There's some pretty consistent across 1,000 district concerns at the moment that I believe are reaching them pretty effectively. And I'm hoping that that will at least bring some information to all districts that speak to the issue that you just raised. So just an added point, this is the #1 topic on every single meeting I attend. And I'm guessing that when you are all at state meetings or county meetings, you're experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of add to that, because I know all of us in various ways have been talking with our legislators, right? Our local legislators, and kind of letting them know our challenges, right, for our district. But I attended a session with the LAO, this legislative office, analyst office, at the school board conference, right, a couple of weeks ago. And I think that speaker from the LAO, from the office, actually, like, I mean, really, hoping for, giving me the optimism, because he said that before, probably this last month, couple months, the legislator hadn't really even entertained anything like the enrollment versus ADA, or, to kind of ease off the cliff, instead of a cliff. But he's actually saying that there's some chatter among the legislators on doing that. So so just to let you know, because I don't know if anyone else attended that session, but that's what I was hearing. So again, a little bit of good news, or at least some hope that they will do something.
Yeah. Someone has a question for Danny. Let's go on with our speaker first. I have a card here from Matt Hoffman.
I'll organize myself by first saying thank you to Mr. Hillman. I always appreciate his presentation styles, whether it was about facilities before or finances now, and his straightforward approach is always appreciated. So thank you, Mr. Hillman, for all that. Man, where to start with all this? But revenue challenges. I mean, we all agree that there's revenue challenges. Anyone who runs a business or has a family budget knows that when you have revenue challenges, you don't go out and spend more money. Like, that's a common sense thing. And so seeing these huge spends of 8.6 for the SRVUSD deal, and then there's probably going to be another 8 on top of that for the Me Too, or maybe a little bit less. I don't know how it works out. And then a combined 8.5 reduction in LCFF and $25 million that you're losing. And then, man, switching, and then there's all kinds of other reductions too. I mean, Danny was talking about the solar that you have to pay back, and California is just going to completely gut that, is from my understanding. So that whole thing's going to have to be redone. You look at the statistics up there too. Local donations are almost 10% of everything you got there. I mean, and that's an incredible number. And that goes back to what we were talking about beforehand about trying to make sure that we don't cut that off. I mean, that's an important part of this whole revenue structure, and it goes directly towards the elementary schools at that level or sections at the higher levels. And if that evaporated in some way, that would be detrimental to the goals, the educational goals of this board here. We look at the multi-year projection, and yeah, you're right at 3% on there, but you're right at 3% because it's like the legislative equivalent of saying, well, I'm going to cash out my 401k to pay for this fancy new car because, well, you know, the neighbor's got that fancy car, so I should have that fancy car too. And that's, again, just, that's not financial responsibility. That's not something that we should be doing. We're taking $30 million of this reserve fund and we're just going to throw it in there, and then we're going to blow through it. And if we take next year, just looking at that, we're right at that 3% level right now. So without question, next year, you're going to be below it at that 24, 25, you're going to be below that 3. So then it's not going to be a positive outlook. It's going to be what's qualified. And that's unless we're going to get more funding. And you know, to use more metaphors here, that's like saying, all right, hey, we're getting cut off by dad because you know he's going to cut off the credit card, but maybe he's going to give us some more money next year. Just maybe we can figure that out, and maybe we can get something more from him. And then talking about the planning on this based off of rumors of legislative things, of saying like, well, I heard this guy say, well, maybe this is going to happen, and I heard this other person say maybe that's going to happen. That's not a way to plan either. So sticking in reality, I think, is important. And I'm not seeing that in this process, not from Mr. Hillman, who put together a great presentation, but from the decision makers who are trying to decide on these goals of this board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, board, other comments or questions?
Can I go?
Rachel, go ahead.
First of all, Mr. Hillman, that was the best first interim report I've ever heard. Super clear, super direct. I look through this every time with a fine-tooth comb, and you're trying to connect this to that, and I'm, I know what I'm doing with this, but you answered every question that I'm always asking myself as I look at these. That was fantastic. We are so lucky to have you as our CBO. I would like to, in my comments, kind of address some of what Mr. Hoffman said, because some good points. I want to acknowledge for you, though, that as we, as a board, sit in closed session to give our negotiating team its parameters to go in and negotiate, we thought through, honestly, everything that you talked about. And I hope it's okay if I'm candid here, but I would like to share with the community some of what we were thinking. And first of all, I want to say to our SRVUSD partners, I hope you take my truth in the intent that it is. It is not at all adversarial. I'm trying to explain to the community where we all were and why you were able to say the nice things you were in your comments too. We've made a commitment that we are going to get along. And we need to get along if we are going to pursue these very important strategic directions. We've all been so absorbed with COVID for the last almost 2 years that we forget that the very week we made the decision to close our schools was the night, or earlier in that week was the 24 hours that several of us spent up at the county office, Keith and Danny and Christine and me and several of us, and Laura and the others on the SRVUSD side. Like this. I don't know if y'all remember, but SRVUSD was talking about striking. SRVUSD was saying, you don't care about us. You're sitting on these big fat reserves. When you run out of reserves, we will help you cut. So you have to understand, we couldn't go into productive work related to strategic directions if we were standing on corners and yelling at each other and not building trust. So all of this was a commitment that our superintendent has, led the charge with, and we have all been partners in about how we deal with this. We had an unbalanced deficit spending situation before this. We recognized this. We knew we had to fix it, but first we had to fix the acrimony. So, Matt, I hope you can understand that. You gave some very good examples of how you might, relate it to the personal budget and all by the car. It wasn't that at all. It was about, let's get the family dynamic in order. We'll have to make priorities. We'll have to make hard decisions. There was hopefulness in that room because Mr. Hillman knew about certain monies that would drop to the bottom line related to the first interim. So we didn't go into this blind. We went into it with very good estimates. And as you can see by where it lines out to 3.0 exactly, it was very well thought through. We're not wearing blinders that we think we're done. And I think our SRVUSD partners and our CSEA partners and our SEIU partners understand that too. And we hope the community can also. So I hope I haven't offended anybody with my comments, but I'm trying to share with you the truth of the kind of decisions we have to do, because as Mr. Raczynski said earlier in the conversation, the teacher shortage is a huge issue. And if we can't put teachers in our kids' classrooms, that's the biggest thing that will make education suffer. So I appreciate that it was confusing because of the first interim and the agreement coming on top of each other like they did, but it was done with very careful thought and full recognition that we have a big boulder yet to push, and a little bit of finger crossing that we're going to get some good news. Okay, that's enough.
Go ahead, Ms. Clark.
These are difficult decisions, and this one wasn't easy to make, but the cost of not doing this right now, especially with the needs of our students and the needs of our staff, was a higher cost to me than not doing it. We needed to invest in not only our staff, but all the resources that they need and that our kids need. And looking at the resources that we had available, I couldn't see sitting on a pile of money and not giving our students and our staff what they need to be able to be successful, because we thought we didn't know what was going to happen down the road. So I totally concur with what Rachel said. I wanted to use the resources that we have in order for us to meet the needs of our district right now. And like she said, we're not oblivious to what we're dealing with. I was in a session at the California School Board Association conference this week with the treasurer for the state of California. And they're estimating conservatively that there's a $32 billion surplus, which they haven't decided what they're going to do with, and it can be as much as $60 billion. We're all advocating very hard at this level with our legislators to try to get our base funding raised, to try to have our funding based on enrollment rather than ADA. And all of these things are circulating around a lot of the districts in California, as has been said. So we have to go from here, from where we are now, and do the work that we need to do so that we can secure our future. But it was a choice for me of sitting on the money or doing something with it that we needed to have right now. And our teachers were very deserving of what they received.
Any other board comments, Laura? No? No? In that case, can I get a motion to approve the first interim?
Second.
Thank you.
The motion was made by Board Member Ordway and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batra.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. And again, Danny, thank you. And also to your team, because I noticed a tremendous amount of work that goes behind the scenes in pulling the numbers together and creating the kind of report that we need to send out to the county. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Item 10.4, we have a public hearing for the joint initial proposal for labor negotiations between the San Ramon Valley Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, Chapter 65, Unit 2 and Unit 3 for the 2020, 21, and 21, 22 reopener negotiations. I'll open that public hearing. I do not have any cards on that. Anyone wish to speak? Not seeing any. I'll close that public hearing and we'll move on to item 10.5, which is the actual consideration of acceptance of the joint initial proposal for labor negotiations between the San Ramon Valley Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, Chapter 65, Unit 2 and Unit 3 for the 2021, 20 to 21 and 21, 22 reopener negotiations. Mr. Rudzinski.
Thank you, President Mintz. So as the board can see, the California School Employees Association, Chapter 65, Units 2 and 3, and the school district have developed a joint initial proposal for negotiations. We've identified 4 separate articles of the collective bargaining agreement that we'd like to discuss. These are reopener negotiations for the 2021 and 21-22 school year. Our intentions are to talk a little bit about layoff because there's new legislation with regards to classified layoffs, salaries, working out of class and reclassification, holidays, and transfer, promotion, demotion, and reinstatement provisions in the contract. So now that the board has opened and closed a public hearing to allow interested members of the public to comment on this, and there were none, we ask that the board take action this evening to accept the joint proposal as it's presented. Thank you.
Any comments or questions from board members? If not, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
You have a motion and a second, please.
The motion
call it.
was made by Board Member Bratt and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batra.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Item 10.6, consideration of approval of employment contract for Chief Business Officer. Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, President Mintz. So I know that at our last meeting, this approval was made, and this is the contract that Mr. Rudzinski is going to speak to in a minute, but I just wanted to confirm a couple of things. First of all, we're very grateful that Danny Hillman has accepted this position. As you would have seen tonight, we're quite excited about all that you bring to us, have always brought to us, and will continue to bring to us in this new role. Secondly, there are some questions that I just wanted to clarify. That Danny Hillman is not interim by this process. That has crossed my desk. He is the permanent chief business official, has the training, has all the appropriate requirements to be that. And third, because I've been asked a few questions by our community about why was there not a application process, it's because we are actually downsizing from 4 assistant superintendents to 3. We do have an opening that we have had for quite some time, which is the executive director of finance that we will use a search firm to hire with and get that broad experience early in 2022. But I also wanted to be clear, even though you're aware of it, but to our community, that we are actually downsizing, which allows for us to put someone with the qualifications into the seat without actually having to expand or go outside for that. So I wanted to offer those general comments. And again, thank you to Danny Hillman for his willingness to serve in this capacity. And Keith, you'll follow through with other important points.
Well, thank you, Dr. Malloy. So as Dr. Malloy just indicated, and as you well recall, the board appointed Mr. Hillman as the new chief business officer of the school district effective Monday, December 6th at its last meeting in November. So this action tonight is a request for approval of Mr. Hillman's employment contract in that position. The employment agreement is the standard agreement for assistant superintendents and chief business officers. It's used in the school district. As such, it's a 2-year agreement that runs through June of 2023. Based upon the salary schedule for assistant superintendents and chief business officers that we have posted on our website, provides an initial annual base salary of $226,486, and it includes the other provisions, rights, and benefits that are offered to other assistant superintendents of the district. With that, we ask that you take action to approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move
Question or
approval.
comment? Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Ordway. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batra,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Very good. Thank you all. And Danny, we really appreciate you stepping into this role. I've known you for quite some time as principal of Doherty Valley and before, and then in the facilities department, we've had a lot of opportunity to work together. I've always seen you to be a upright guy and also well educated and well. And clearly through the presentation you gave tonight, you've demonstrated both of those things as well. We really look forward to seeing you continue to your success in this new role for you and for the district. So thank you. Moving on now to item 10.7, we have consideration of approval of Universal Transitional Kindergarten Plan. Ms. Hararo.
Yes, thank you, President Mintz. I would like to introduce members of our Educational Services team, our Executive Director, Nadine Rosenzweig, our SELPA Director, Linda Raleigh-Tom, and our Director of Facilities, Aaron Hurst, to come up and present to you our plan for Universal TK.
Good evening, everyone, board members, assistant superintendents, and the community. We're delighted to be here this evening to share with you our plan for Universal TK for our youngest learners. So we're here to present the historical perspective of where we currently are with TK and where we're heading. Next slide. So TK expansion has required a lot of communication and partnering with a lot of departments in our district and a lot of teamwork and communication. So we are experiencing a 4-year phase-in of Universal TK that will begin in 2022-23 school year and will have full compliance in 25-26. It broadens the age eligibility and imposes ratio staff to student changes and facilities impact, which you will hear about. Next slide. So you might remember, several of you were board members when TK first began in this district in 2010, and that was an exciting time. It was a big change in the kindergarten age, and over time from 2014, 15, and currently in 2015, there was an expansion of TK and the birthdays for children eligible changed. Now in 2021, Assembly Bill 130 has taken access to TK, which will be universal TK, and it's essentially a new grade level that we are expanding to. And why don't you go to the next slide, please? So TK will be a new grade level. In 2021, this school year, 21-22, we offer the children can come into TK birthday September 2nd through December 2nd. Beginning next year in 22-23, it expands the offer of TK to 4-year-olds whose birthday will turn 5 from September 2nd through February 2nd. And then there will be a 4-year rollout, and by 25-26, all of TK will be 4-year-olds in TK. TK is now referred to as Universal TK, and also you might hear it being called Universal Pre-Kindergarten by 25-26. The impact for next year is that the staffing ratio is a 12-1. So we can have 24 children in the classroom with a certificated teacher and an additional staff member in there. It can be classified. A lot of things we're going to share with you are still subject to negotiation with all of our union partners. So I don't want to make an assumption that things, there is only one way to do it. So for 22-23, it's a maximum of 12 students per adult. Depending on funding from 23-24 onward, it will be 10 students per adult. Next slide. And I'm going to have Linda come over. We're working very closely with HR, with teachers, because this will mean possibly more teachers in TK and some credentialing issues that will come into play. We're working closely with HR, our credential analysts, and I'll let you
Absolutely.
speak to that.
So part of what we're doing is that we're working to make sure that all of our TK teachers who will be joining us when we expand next year are fully credentialed with the correct amount of early childhood education. Those TK teachers that we currently have completed that training, and or because we have had, as we discussed earlier, TK in our district for a little over 10 years now, that they have been grandfathered into the current TK credentialing requirements. Part of what we're doing, if you don't mind going to the next slide, is what we're doing right now is a lot of groundwork behind the scenes, again, working with our human resources colleagues around determining what our certificated and classified needs are. And we are also working with our union partners, both on the teacher side with Servia as well as the classified side with CSEA, around how we move forward and how we create our next level of TK for our students. We've begun having informational meetings to review those requirements for potential new TK teachers, and we're also looking at possible recruitment strategies as well. Part of what we're also doing is looking at enrollment and draft projections, so I'm going to let Erin Hurst speak to that briefly for us.
Thank you, Nadine and Linda. This current slide shows the historical projections, enrollment projections for the TK program from its inception here at the district. And this is based upon basically the zip code area, the births in the zip code area 94582, just as an example of how the program has been growing. And next slide. This is a snapshot of the enrollment projections for the full implementation of universal TK. And this is based upon numbers from the Davis demographics data from November 2021. Next slide. And for the facilities department, in terms of preparation for the universal TK and the full implementation into the academic year 25-26, we need to start taking a look at all of the campuses and the elementary school campuses, the classrooms and the availability, looking at some of the features that would be in the classrooms in terms of bathrooms and sinks, and basically project out the TK students that would be coming in as part of this adjustment in the age range for this program, and identify the classrooms that are available and make sure that they're ready for all the students to be in the classrooms. Additionally, we're also reviewing the playground structures that are within the current kindergarten TK and K play yards, and making sure that those are all age appropriate for the students that will be coming in as part of both the kindergarten as well as the TK programs.
So program considerations wise, we're really looking at continuing with what we're doing, which is our current practice of having a 3.5-hour day. We're looking at the same state level requirements of 336,000 annual minutes over a 180-day school year. And we're looking at the fact that we will be receiving that same per student funding as kindergarten. But this does require a second adult in the classroom. The legislation is very clear that it is 2 adults or a 12-to-1 ratio at this point. So we are looking at other potential revenue sources and options for that going forward.
I do want to say, I know several of our TK teachers are listening this evening. They have been meeting all year. We meet tomorrow. They've been, I know this evening they were also on a meeting listening to state partners, but they have, we're talking about curriculum because we follow the preschool learning foundations. We're looking at professional development. that is needed for working with younger students and partnering with our C&I department to see what curriculum we currently have and what we need with regard to materials. And so our current teachers meet to review and plan for the PD, and we're working with HR on that as well. Enrollment is open through December 17th, so we will have a better idea of the numbers of students joining us next year in TK. And then the final slide is it takes a village to do this work. And so it's been exciting to work with Ed Services facilities, our communications business, and then HR and our union partners to get to where we're going. So we will stop here and entertain any questions.
Thank all three of you for the presentation. Any questions or comments from board members?
How many students are in TK right now?
A lot. So some of our classes, I don't have the exact number, I can find out, but several of our classes have 16, 19. The largest classes have 25 students in them because we try to, TK is a program, we try to keep them in their home school. Every school in our district has a TK class except 3 of our current elementary schools because of space. So that's.
And do you have any idea what the increase might be when
we will know
you open
more
it up?
about that at the beginning of January because enrollment stops December 17th. And I know we have meetings next week looking at that to see what our.
And are we looking at having it on every elementary campus?
That is what our goal is.
Trustee Clark, so the TK enrollment for this past month is a little over 200 at this moment. That is down from previous years because TK is not a required program. And with the pandemic, many families elected to just keep their kids home for another year. And so that was one question. We are planning to do it every site, mention that. And then we'll know, because right now the enrollment period is open. We moved the entire enrollment timeline up. Normally it doesn't open until January or February. And so we did our rollover early to try to get information out to families now so that we get information back sooner so that we see how many families are interested that are eligible in this next window. That projection will drive most of what happens next. There's some things that will have to happen no matter what around the way we develop the program and how we staff it and things like that. But how many staff members will all depend upon the number of kids that want to do it. So, but to have one at every site, and we'll just have to evaluate it as the demand comes in, and we'll meet that demand with the supply we have.
Will we be getting any extra funding from the state around this program?
Yes.
Speaking of money.
The short answer is sort of. There is a planning grant that is available. I won't get into the weeds right now. It's a little bit of money, but it's not substantive amounts. And there is a distinct disconnect at this moment between what the legislators and the governor want TK to look like versus how they're funding it. And how they're funding it right now is the exact same as kinder. So it's about $9,000 and change, $9,200 or something like that for every student. But they want a lower class size, and they want a bigger classroom, and they want outdoor spaces, and they want all these things. And so at this moment, they are projected to give us the same dollar amount for a TK student as a kinder student with extra thoughts that they'd like us to do for that TK student, and no additional dollars at this point ongoing for facilities at all. There is a grant, but I think it equates to something like only a couple of $1 million per district. So this is the program as they've rolled it in does need to be fully funded if they want us to actualize their dream of a robust, I use that word again, but I think it's been about a year and a half. I think I can use it again. A robust TK program. And so they need to match the funding. They need to do some things and fully fund it. But at this moment, there's very little additional funding.
So we have to plan for their higher service level, which we're fully supportive of. It makes a lot of sense. But technically, is it an unfunded mandate? if they say you have to do it this way, but we're not paying you?
That would fit the definition, yes, of an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, sorry.
'Cause there's lots of other unfunded mandates that, they draw the line at. So that's interesting.
We do have a speaker card. Do we have other questions
I have
for
another
staff?
question. Did you
yeah,
have
Oh,
something?
yeah, go ahead. We'll do the questions first and then get our speaker.
With TK becoming a rolling out at universally, will it be, and it's considered an additional grade level, will it be a mandated grade level? Or will parents have the option of opting out of TK in, 3 or 4 years from now when it becomes?
They do have the option to opt out. They can
Even
even opt out of
kindergarten, isn't it?
kindergarten as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
So
I just wanted to make sure.
that hasn't been part of any change I've heard of.
Do we have any sense of the percentage of families that will choose TK in the public schools? Do we have any data on that?
Well, we had a parent interest. Several of parents called us because they had to commit to their preschools. So they did ask questions of school principals and to us. So we're optimistic. Our TK teachers are certificated and fantastic. So it's a great public school education. And I think we're ready to welcome our children for the opportunity. So
Trustee Bratt, also the projection that we are assuming, that we are adopting assumes 100% of the live births will come. And the reason for that is because historically they have for the kinder grade level. This goes back to the comment about destination district earlier in the evening. We actually end up with, sorry to use the word actual twice, but an actual enrollment in our kinder and TK, pretty much the kinder, of over 100%, which tells us that the birth rates that we know of come, and then we get more. So that grade level tends to we get everybody. People want to move here for that if they can. So we're using that for the projection for now, and obviously we'll address that and update it if the numbers come out, the actuals come out differently. But unlike certain districts in other parts of the state, they're only projecting 85% or so of the birth rate to come to their school. There's also, we are sitting in a certain geography that lends itself well to we're a good option, as Nadine mentioned. And in other places in the state, like Southern California, for instance, there are lots of options that are very close by, so they could go lots of different places. So that's part of the projection, and like I said, we'll update it.
Okay, thank you. And then, do we have a outreach plan in terms of communicating to those families, especially the families that aren't yet in our school district, because it's their oldest that may be entering TK? So within the community, so that they understand that this is now an option that wasn't there last year or the year before.
So our communications team did help us with outreach. We did reach out to preschools. We had it in the patch. It was on social media. So we hope we reached out. All of our elementary schools put things in newsletters to continue that. We worked with our PTA council and they got the word out too. So we feel we hope we've done a good job on that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I would just suggest that we make sure that the community understands that each year it changes and it adds new students so that, they don't think that because their child may not be eligible, this year they will be because the birth dates are changing. So.
And I had a question, kind of more a practical thing about facilities, right? So we have TK classes now at all but 3 of our schools. So we should be pretty ready to have new students, but depending on the amount. So I was just wondering, because with facilities, sometimes it takes a little bit the timeline, right, of actually changing facility or something like that might take a longer time. So how do you think, Erin, that we will be ready for this next year, and then as we go along to
We
actually
are
house?
rapidly evaluating the situation. So we're hoping here in the next month or two to have a final level of comfort to support all the students that are coming in as part of this next year, academic year. And we're going to, run through that finish line to see if we can match up the projections along with classrooms all the way through the full implementation of the program. So we're definitely tracking that and keeping all of the other programs that are at campuses in mind as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Is it a good bet that our sites that are allowed to do the extended day kindergarten will lose that ability because the classrooms will need to be used for AM, PM kindergarten to accommodate TK, or am I jumping to conclusions?
I think it's a programmatic decision that we will ask the board for direction on, because if extended day something is the direction, that could put a pinch quicker on facilities. And then we would have to offset that decision with more facilities somewhere, somehow. So if that's not the decision and we go with the facilities we have and we try to run that timeline out to full implementation, because the district is still declining overall and we have available classrooms, we might be able to do it without building new buildings.
Okay.
But some of the programmatic decisions will limit other options, and we will bring that back once we have it.
Thanks.
Very good. Any other questions? The only thing I would ask at this point, and it gets back to something Danny said, relative to the percentage of kids that seem to come to our TK program. I'm just wondering though if we have plans or have had a need for addressing those students who don't go through either TK or kindergarten, for instance. When kids show up for first grade for the first time and they haven't gone through our programs, are there things that we need to address to get those students up to speed, or are we finding that that's not an issue for us?
We look at every student case by case. There are some that start in first grade, they move from other states or countries, and then the school teams know with assessments that they do, they'll have a parent meeting to see if that's the appropriate grade level. So we do have plans in place, either within the current grade level to support the student, or there are conversations on school teams to look and make some thoughtful decisions on what's in the best interest of the student.
And has there been any conversation at the state level to make either of these programs, TK or kindergarten, mandatory?
Not that I'm aware of. So
Nothing? Okay. Very good. I do have one speaker card on this topic from Helen. Thank you.
Helen of Doherty Valley here. So I have a few questions and also comments. Because of California School Board of Association just recently imposed sexual harassment mandates that are really not about sexual harassment, but more about like preventing our youths from courting, dating, eventually getting married, have children. I foresee this trend of not having children in our state or even in our nation is going to be persistent. So, therefore, I feel that it is important to know that this TK is not going to be the solution for the declining problem in our school district. Number one. Number two, let's focus on TK. Why is it that TK is now a hot trend? Because Democrat politicians want to please their grassroots and say, vote for me, then your students can go to preschool. Really, this is preschool for free. That's why it's not mandatory. This is meant for people who are near poverty lines or people who cannot afford a quality preschool education. So I want to ask the governor and our politicians to be honest. Where are you taking us with this? If you're going to take all of our 4-year-olds in the future onto this bus that everyone is going to have to start sitting in the classroom, listen to teachers. And by the way, I don't know how long is the school day for this. You guys didn't mention that. I definitely oppose it because a 4-year-old should be out there in our parks. That's why we have a bunch of parks. Should be out there in our community programs, learning how to swim, learning how to kick balls, not sitting there on the carpet and listening. First of all, that is not physically and mentally and intellectually really appropriate if they're going to make it like 7 or 8 hours sitting there. Also, facility has to be appropriate. I don't know if any of you have gone out there and assessed how many kids cannot go potty properly because your toilets are so much higher than their height. I know that there is a study that currently our children are getting shorter and shorter. So nobody addresses that. And then there's this concern about curriculum being sexually oriented. I definitely don't want any 4-year-olds to be told that, boys are girls and girls are boys. And then
Thank you for your comments. Need to move on. Okay, we have consideration and approval of universal transitional kindergarten plan. Are there any other comments or questions, or ready for a motion?
I was going to make the motion.
Oh, go right ahead. I'm not
I move
seeing it.
approval of our TK plan.
I second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out. Student Board Member Bacha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. And just a reminder that it's almost 10 o'clock.
Yes, I was going to ask for a motion to extend the meeting until 10:30, if that can be unanimous.
So move. I'll second.
Call up, please.
Student Board Member Bacha, call out to extend time to 10:30, please.
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Thank
Motion
you.
passes.
Moving on to item 10.8, consideration of adoption of resolution for number 49, 2122, approval of provisional internship permit PIP request. Mr. Regenski, I know this is a regular item for us.
This is a standing, unfortunately, action item on literally every board agenda this year. Yes, we're looking to hire a resource specialist under a provisional internship permit at Coyote Creek Elementary School. Approval is requested.
Very good. Can I have a motion to approve?
Yes, so move.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Motion was made by Board Member Ordway and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out for Student Board Member Bacha,
Aye.
Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt,
Aye.
Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Very good. Thank you. Item 10.9, consideration of acceptance in the Measure D Facilities Oversight and Advisory Committee Annual Report for June 30th, 2020. And I'll just point out that we're getting this report in before 10 o'clock, which is the first in the last at least 3 years now. So let me start with Danny Hillman.
Thank you very much, President Mintz. So we have tonight our president of the Facilities Oversight and Advisory Committee, Scott Seidenberg, who is going to present the annual report from that committee. Basically, it's a summary of Measure D, the 2012 general obligation bond that voters passed to improve, facilities in all of our schools. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me aboard, the audience members, the families at home. I don't know if mine's still up or not, but we'll see. John, quick overview of how the Facilities Oversight Committees came about was Prop 39 as an improvement on oversight of bond funds for school construction. There's certain requirements of who we have and how often we are supposed to meet. This is our current members. It's a very great, diverse group. We have people from all walks of life. I find this to be really useful, that the experience is brought. And over the years, I've been on committees both in Southern California and here. And this is a phenomenal group. I think that they really do dig into the details and come up with great ideas and ask great questions of the staff and each other. So Measure D is our $260 million program. As you can see, cumulative expenses through the period that we're reporting for got to roughly 75%, and now we're well over 80%, and quickly spending down over the next probably 2 years, 2 to 3 years. I wanted to go back real quick and just remind the public that there is information about the overall program and the spending that's available on the school board website, and you can see it there on the bottom. All right. What we are doing is we are reporting on the actual expenditures through June 30th of 2020. There was an audit report that was done. We reviewed in detail what the expenditures were with that, matched it up to the regular reports we were given by staff, and believe that everything is accurately reported. You'll note that the dates of this lag significantly because the school year will end, the audit of the overall funds starts maybe about this time of year and goes into the spring, with the final report read out to the board, which has been deferred the last couple of years because of COVID. Overall, revenues are basically the bonds being issued. The expenditures you'll see fluctuate depending on what has occurred. For the broader public, the early years included Bella Vista, the elementary school out in Verde Valley. Those middle years are really your San Ramon Valley and Stone Valley expenditures. And now it's the heavy lifting modernizations of a number of elementary schools primarily. For this past fiscal year, what we were looking at was constantly we're measuring against the overall plans and making sure that what is being spent is what the plans were. And one of the things that we really have been doing the last couple of years is let's go back to the original bond language, ensure that we are still holding true to what was asked of the public to fund. We know that there's always some changes, but things like universal TK was not what we had in the original bond. And so we were trying to stick with what was in that program, say this is what we promised the public we would look at, whether it was new campuses, significant improvements, or general modernizations. We've been looking at safety as a big piece. There's regularly questions about air filters or things like that. You'll see in the community a lot of fencing that has gone up to protect the campuses and provide for greater student safety and staff safety. Those improvements, one of the things I also like to say here is that we've heard from staff and we've asked them about the consistency of doing that, which you'll see one of those areas would be the elementary schools and access points. And you'll see the number of those schools now that have a single access point during the school day through the office to get onto the campus. And I feel that's one of the strong points I've seen in this program over the last few years. Again, elementary schools, it's consistency, and then also that progress of designs. As we transition in the funding, one of the things that we already started talking about was TK playgrounds. So we may not be able to do it directly under the bond funds, but we can advise the district on its normal capital plans, how we see that may apply. The middle schools was getting Stone Valley finished and getting the work underway at Charlotte Wood to really, improve what's on that campus, both flow-wise and the utilization of the space. And then obviously at San Ramon Valley, it was finishing out not just the buildings, but the parking renovations and all of the fields that you can really see pretty much complete there. And just a quick overall summary of where some of the spending was during that fiscal year. As you can see, there's a good amount at a large number of campuses. And the next one, you can see a little bit of the work that's being done. So at Vista Grande, what this is intending to show is first the review of the entrance during the day and the ability to move between, they took a space, reconfigured it so you could get into the office during the day, but provide for that safety. The other piece that was interesting, this is not just the only campus where thresholds have been changed. And there was added pavement to provide greater access for students with disabilities in particular. And I thought that this was a great, having seen this well before, and even walking this with one of my kids that went to that school. And they're like, this really would change the hazards and the accessibility. Moving on, Sycamore Valley was another one. There was a lot of discussion. It was good district-wide about roofing. What was nice here is that we were able to find a solution that worked not just there, but at other campuses. But we had even discussed, would it make sense to have more of the metal or aluminum roof versus, you know, kind of something more traditional, and what was really going to be the benefit time-wise, as an example. Middle schools, you know, most of it has been Stone Valley. This was really bringing it closer to finishing. Unfortunately, that was right around COVID, so the campus never got fully utilized, unfortunately, for our board president at the time. And then the work that was starting at Charlottewood, the next 2 years, you'll see a lot more work on Charlottewood. Moving on to that overall picture of where Stone Valley finished up, including a lot of the field remediation improvement on the back end. At Charlottewood, this is a lot of just the lifting of electrical, or I believe I captured the one room that was put in that was kind of a larger space that provided different options through the construction phase and long term, rather than building a new building, using something modular that's still going to last, hopefully 25, 30 years. And then finally onto the high schools, you can see this is really the last big chunk of the building at San Ramon, and a little bit of work at the other schools. And then a view from the finished building out towards what are now the fields and that back parking lot, which is a huge improvement even from 2 or 3 years ago. In conclusion, we have reviewed in detail both the budget, the original plans, and concluded that the monies that were spent during the year 1920 were spent as intended, and we are seeing the outcome. And that's our continued focus through the next couple of years. And with that, questions?
No, I'd just like to thank you, Scott, and the committee. I'm one of the board liaisons to the FOAC committee. And yeah, just like to thank you and the full committee on all your efforts and dedications on making sure, right, ensuring that all the money, taxpayers' money, is spent wisely, and on buildings or environments for students and our staff that are safe, pleasant, and attractive. So thank you.
Any other comments? Scott, I want to thank you and the whole committee for all of your work. You know, one of the things that's been different about the way that we as a district have handled this particular issue, under Prop 39 and others, is that ours is also advisory, not just oversight. And you demonstrated that in a number of your comments, where it wasn't just about the very important aspect of how we were spending the taxpayers' money and making sure we're doing it appropriately, but also all of the additional recommendations and advice and time going in and looking at school sites, actually visiting school sites and making long-term recommendations to the district that really have added a value to the process, not just the oversight, which is also very important. So I thank you and the members of the committee for that. I think it's been very worthwhile, and we still have another little bit to go for next year or so, but we've been able to get some tremendous work done out of that in 2012 bond measure. With that, can I get a motion to accept the committee's report?
So moved.
You have a motion and a second. Call out, please.
The motion was made by Board Member Bratton, seconded by Board Member Ordway. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batra.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Very good. Thank you again, Scott.
Thank you.
And also to the facility staff, tremendous amount of work. And Aaron in the back of the room has really stepped up, done a tremendous job for us. Moving on to item 10.10, consideration of adoption of January through March 2022 resolutions numbers 16 through 21 for the 21-22 school year. Ms. Vargo.
Thank you, President Mintz. This resolution captures our board workshop that we held on December 7th regarding our resolutions for this school year. We are proposing that we continue on with our original January through March resolutions you see listed here. Also at that time in the workshop, we discussed having a second board workshop in March to look at our remaining April through June 2022 resolutions. In addition to asking that we bring forward in January a career and technical education resolution to the board on the January 18th meeting, and another resolution to the March 2022 meeting surrounding climate change. So we'd ask the board to consider this for approval.
Very good. Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from board members? Otherwise,
I have a few,
Okay.
just really content kind of questions or asks. So on the Words Matter Week resolution, we don't mention, it's more updating these, I think, is kind of where I'm going with this, but we don't mention cyberbullying, and I think that that's very important aspect of bullying and what's happening in our schools today with our students. And so maybe just, adding a whereas, cyberbullying has more than doubled between, I just found some information and stuff. And then just in general, and this maybe is maybe it's a question that we need to dig more into when we do have our second workshop, but is including, in these resolutions and specifically with the art education, it mentions kindergarten through grade 12, but we really serve TK through adult transition. And I think it kind of does a disservice, especially to our adult transition students, to not include them in these resolutions. So just from a general standpoint, as we're looking at updating all of our resolutions to really make sure that we're talking about the entire educational student body. And then with the Women's History Month, I would like to see that instead of creating kind of binary roles, that we do look to reflect the experiences of all genders. I know that there is in one of the whereas we talk about the educational code, and I did look that up, and it still does say men and women, and so I assume we can't change that. But then in the second or I guess it's the last whereas where we talk about the history social science framework. Just changing men and women to all genders, just to be more inclusive, especially with our non-binary students.
Any other questions or comments? I do have one speaker card. Did you have something?
No, go ahead.
Speaker card from, looks like, it's Helen. It was hard to read. Yes.
I want to remind this board and every single adult who comes to accuse a minor of cyberbullying that you need to be careful that it is difficult to authenticate their identity, because oftentimes these occur off school hours and then that you have no access of as educators. And then you also don't know if anybody can falsify. For example, tonight, many people try to imposter as me. If I'm a minor, I could just sit there and say, what happened to that? And you guys can accuse me and call me names. I can say that you are reality for me. But, things happen. I just want you to keep that in mind, that when you accuse a minor of cyberbullying, authentication, identity is the most difficult. Also, for example, my students in this school district can be identified as a target to be cyberbullied by PLA all the way in Communist China just because I'm wearing this mask right now. So please, if you find any cyberbullying that is worth your time, please, you need to really rely on perhaps the police the board, because how else are you going to access the app? Are you going to believe whatever screenshots they give you are authenticated? Or are you going to believe that, a minor who may tell you that I'm actually a victim is a victim? It can go both ways. In our society, real is fake, fake is real. Please be very careful, because you are going to be sentencing a minor's lifetime. So please be very careful what you consider a cyberbullying crime, especially the ones that happen off school hours. Thank you so much for listening.
Just a reminder that this particular item has to do with the adoption of January through March 2022 resolutions. Any other questions or comments? Rachel?
Since this is an approval, I would like to suggest that our motion be to incorporate Laura's changes, and she could give them to Christine. I mean, were they clear enough that we approve them as amended that way? So I move that we approve the resolutions with Laura's
With
amendments.
the amendments. Do you have a second?
I second.
Thank you.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batra.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 10.11, consideration of approval of revisions to administrative regulation 6153, school-sponsored trips.
Thank you. This consideration of approval of revisions to school-sponsored field trips we also discussed at that same board workshop. And this is the consideration of removing the provision where the out-of-state field trips that currently come to you for approval be removed, and that the preliminary approval is the responsibility of the principal and then also our educational services team. So we do have our executive director of secondary, John Campopiano, here as well, if you have questions. So this is just to approve moving that out of our current administrative regulation.
And as Ms. Water mentioned, this was something that we talked about at our workshop this past week. Other questions, comments from board members? Rachel?
Christine, I'm totally supportive of what we talked about at the workshop. As I was reading the AR, I noticed in section 14 of the general regulations, so it's page 127 of the packet, and it's the big long paragraph near the top of that page. There's a lot of, it seems like the terminology, it gets kind of muddied between supervisor, chaperone. Could you guys just look at that and maybe clean that up as well? I remember last time we really looked at this resolution, part of it came from when parents were chaperoning these trips, the pieces of really what is their job and what are they responsible for. And I was trying to look at this and say, is there a difference between supervisor responsibilities and chaperones? And so it just, the language seemed kind of mushy. So if you could just look at it. Thank you.
And then I'd like to, I think for people, right, who didn't get to attend our workshop, understand why we're doing this, making our changes to this item. It's a lot because of timing. Is it for a board meeting to have the out of state field trips or school field trips? I mean, why? It's not because we're right. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Trustee Ordway. As we spoke about at the board workshop, and just those for not able to attend, we go through the site principal first, and then it comes to our educational services department, and we vet all the requirements and the measures, and it's more efficient if we are able to do it in that way without coming to the trustees. One example is a national champion robotics team from Doherty Valley who had no knowledge that they were going to be selected to go to the nationals. And we were able to facilitate it through our educational service department, but we would not have been able to get it to the board agenda at that specific time to meet the monthly requirement.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And just wanted to kind of clarify that for those who didn't attend our board meeting on why this is an item.
Well, and I think it's not just the timing, it's also what value does our looking at them add to the approval process when they're being scrutinized thoroughly at the site level and then in educational services. And so it's just, why add the extra step? Wasn't adding anything.
And if I can add that it's always within your purview to review and shift the parameters we use if you wish to. And so we will follow the direction that you give and then just implement that, in the ways in which John and Christina have described.
Exactly, and that's the board policy and ARs that are being established here or have been established already, and the expectation that they're being implemented by staff as the board has directed. Any other questions, Lord? Do you have anything else? Can I get a motion then?
So moved.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Ordway and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batcha.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. New 1012, which was item 11.3 on consent, consideration of approval of contract and purchases, $50,000. This item was asked to be pulled by Helen. If you can just let us know if you're looking for something of clarification so we can get past.
Yes, I would like clarifications on 4 items for this particular agenda item. Number 1, there's no number, so please follow along. And if there's any question, please ask me. I saw an item that was listed for CNPOS software licensing. I'm wondering if CN represents China. It was listed for LINQ for $128,000. $128,197.
Yeah,
Oh,
what's
sure.
your other question?
Okay. And then there was another one that was listed for CDW. It was listed as staff device. I'm not sure what device for staff it is. That costs $195,463. And then there was Ari Jones. That was educational software, but it says not software, I'm sorry, solution, I think. And then this is staff device. If it's a solution, why is it a device? I don't understand. It was listed for $130,477. And then there was a Kitchell, and it was listed as project management service. Is that some sort of consulting service? $200,000. Thank you.
So the 4 items, Link is a software. It's a software license as it's listed. CN is child nutrition. So CNPOS software license is just abbreviated child nutrition point of sale software license. It's a 3-year agreement. It's basically our new point of sale software. It's essentially how the students will check out. Think of like a cash register without the cash. It also includes some added features like being able to do menus and the nutritional data. Some of the things actually that student member Basha was speaking about earlier when he met with Director Riker about this. This is the software that will do that. It's a mid-year rollout. It will also facilitate the mobile app ordering and some of the other things that were discussed. The CDW and the Ari Jones Educational Services for staff devices, we have a staff device, that's not a word, a device replacement program is what I'm trying to say. Basically, every year there's a certain number of staff members, their machine, their computer, their laptop, their iPad, whatever it is they use for work is aged out. We recycle those or get rid of them, and we buy new ones. These are the 2 contracts to do that, CDW and the Ari Jones Solutions. And then the last one, Kitchell, is project management services for 21-22 fiscal year. This is for construction management services to supplement our facilities department so that we can finish the rest of Measure D in the timeline that we have, which is essentially 3 more summers. This summer of 22, the summer of 23, and I think the summer of 24. And so this is just a little bit of extra help to do that. We have not only Measure D stuff, but there's also requests from school sites to do various projects that a small project takes as much time as a big project in the sense that you have to go through all the same steps. So even something that's only $10,000, it does require a ton of oversight. And so we're bringing on a little bit of help to do that. And this is all paid not through the general fund at all. This is through Fund 21, which is our building fund. Those are the 4 contracts.
Thank you, Danny. Any questions or comments from board members? Otherwise, can I get a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batcha.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. The next item that was asked to be removed from the consent calendar was item 11.9, which is now 10.13, consideration of approval of legal services agreement. Do you have a question or
I
for
do. I have three
clarification?
questions. I have three questions regarding this item, President. So I'm wondering if the new legal firm that you're considering to hire because of a flat rate fee, Kelly, Freeman, Fellfrost, and Smith. I read the report, but I didn't see where they're located. Are they native Californian? Because I recall last time we had a legal counsel who addressed education coming from the national level. I just want to make sure that the caliber that we're hiring is very experienced with California education, number one. Number two, there was a page that listed our past legal service fee, and I noticed that there is a really strange phenomenon. In 2021, the legal fee for student services jumped from 16,637 to in the 1819 school year to last year 93,931. That's a whopping about what 600% more. What happened to our services that deserve so much legal fee? And then in facility fee, it jumped from the 17-18 year of 149,225 to last year facility. I would think we didn't use any facility. It jumped to 280,470. I'm not sure, why are we? Do we have like a janitorial service problem? And then lastly, the third question is, do you foresee that this flat fee is going to be under our current annual aggregate fee? Or do you think it's going to be average, or are you giving a little bit more, hoping that, we are lucking out because you anticipate a lot more legal liability in the future? So I'm just wondering, are we targeting more because we foresee increased service fee, or are we targeting average, or are we targeting to save money at less? Thank you.
So I'll answer those questions. First, the purpose of this RFP and this proposal is so that we can work strategically with one legal firm that has multiple expertise and will meet our needs. It is a California company. Fees reflect our needs, and our needs change. So if we're dealing with litigation, for example, that might be special education related, it would fall under that category. If we're dealing with processes that are related to facilities, it would fall under that category. And that's why you see different numbers. We don't actually put budget aside by department. It's specific to whatever the needs are that particular year. Third, the reason why we wanted to go with the flat fee is because we were working to find a firm that we already work with, by the way. This is one of the firms that we presently work with, so we have experience, where they would actually work with us differently. What I mean by that is we appreciate the wisdom and insight that comes from this expertise. We would like to call upon that wisdom and expertise whenever required, and it will hopefully then inform our work as a part of kind of the strategic proposals or recommendations we bring to you. So the goal through this process, and it's outlined here in the report, is that we will review our work together annually, and we will determine what a fair flat rate is annually, and it will be based upon whatever it is that we've done historically. So there still will be a record of the hours that we have chosen. So I want to be really clear, that we have used. So I want to be really clear that even though we want to strengthen this relationship, we still will have some around how the service is used. So it's not as though everyone in the district has access to our legal firms. It doesn't work like that. It has to come through our cabinet. And then that type of annual review will take place, and the next year's amount would be reflective of the 3-year average that has gone before it. And so that's basically how this process works.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. Any other questions or comments from board members before we take a vote? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Call out vote. Student Board Member Batra?
Aye.
Board Member Clark?
Aye.
Board Member Bratt?
Aye.
Board Member Hurd?
Aye.
Board Member Mintz?
Aye.
Board Member Ordway?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 and it is 10:30.
Yes, can I ask for an extension to 10:45? Hopefully that'll be enough. to
I
get-
move we extend to 10:45.
I'll second.
And the call out vote for that, Student Board Member Batra?
Aye.
Board Member Clark?
Aye.
Board Member Bratt?
Aye.
Board Member Hurd?
Aye.
Board Member Mintz?
Aye.
Board Member Ordway?
Aye.
Thank you. 5-0.
Okay, we have one other item off of the consent calendar, which was item 10.16, which is now, I'm sorry, 11.16, which is now 10.14, adoption of textbooks. This item was asked by Susan Lancaster.
Good evening. Sorry it's late. So I'm going to get out of the financial stuff, get back in the classroom where we educate our kids. This book is called Front Desk. It's for 9 to 10-year-olds. It's fourth grade. It was the winner of the Asia Pacific American Award for Children's Literature, and the review synopsis in Amazon is it's about a little girl named Mia. So Mia Tang has a lot of secrets. Number one, she lives in a motel, not a big house. Every day, while her immigrant parents clean the rooms, 10-year-old Mia manages the front desk of the Cala Vista Motel and tends to its guests. Number two, her parents hide immigrants. And if the mean motel owner, Mr. Yao, finds out they've been letting them stay in the empty rooms for free, the Tangs will be doomed. Number three, she wants to be a writer, but how can she when her mother thinks she should stick to math because English is not her first language? It will take all of Mia's courage, kindness, and hard work to get through this year. Will she be able to hold on to her job? Will she help the immigrants and guests escape Mr. Yao and go for her dreams? Okay, this is not, my problem isn't with immigration, okay? Of course, this book has an agenda, thinly veiled, but it's a tender story giving the message to our 9 and 10-year-olds that lying and breaking your employer's policy rules is sometimes okay and even justified if they are perceived as unfair or unjust. In this case, it's encouraging children to empathize and side with Mia and her family as they sneak around behind their employer's back to provide their friends with free stuff. Mia is to be admired by the reader. It's okay and it's justified because immigrants need help. In the real world of business, this is stealing from the business owner. I was a business owner. I have employees, or I had. And if an employee was found to be involved in a scheme to give away my office supplies to their friends, at the very least, their employment would be terminated. So on one hand, your strategic plan claims to value behaviors that build character, but you vote to approve books that promote and confuse a message that to our young kids that they're regarding what honest and desirable behaviors look like in action. So this is more because it's okay to steal, break laws regarding property because it's unfair that some people have more than others. So basically, you are signaling to young kids that it's okay to steal if it aligns with a progressive political agenda. No, instead, you'll say this book is a cute story highlighting the difficulties immigrants face. It's a sweet tale. I'm sure you're going to unanimously approve it, but I don't think you should.
Thank you for your comments. Christine, did you want to make a comment? No, okay. All right, any question or comments from the board? Seeing none. Helen of Doherty Valley.
I want to thank the previous speaker for pointing out the content of this textbook, as I didn't catch the detail of the textbook. As an Asian, I want to denounce this book because it's making me looking like I'm a thief just because I look Asian. For the public record, I am Asian. I am not one of the character that's illustrated in this book. That definitely doesn't represent me. I'm a yellow person, but I don't behave like that. I'm not sure which nationality or race that they're really trying to portray. It's definitely not me from Taiwan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, can I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Ordway and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Call it vote. Student Board Member Batra.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Item 12.0, Administrative Matters. 12.1, Board Member Reports. First, Ronit, do you have anything you'd like to?
So, in addition to just the things that I mentioned previously with the Student Senate, I was able to attend the Monte Vista Site Council meeting since I have been a part of that for this school year. I've also convened with several other student board members, not just from California, but also from some other states, particularly Maryland, because they tend to have a much higher student board member population as well, just due to the policies and regulations surrounding their school board laws. So understanding how operations work within their districts, how things work here, and just really working through, for example, like the way that governance works or what to do to be able to advocate holistically, and having that sort of like support network among a lot of different student board members has been pretty useful and fun. But apart from that, I was able to attend a couple of different events just at school and outside of school, including the Danville Mayor's installation. And I am excited for finals next week and my next semester. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
Well, I've been enjoying my noon duty at Charlotte Wood and Pine Valley, a couple days at Charlotte Wood and one at Pine Valley. And it's just great to be around the kids. And I forgot how middle school kids run everywhere. It's pretty amazing, but great energy there. And I've really enjoyed that and plan on doing some more of it. I attended my second social emotional well-being meeting last week, and that committee is doing a lot. We're getting a lot of good input from the other people on the committee. And I want to give a shout out to Jessica Colson and Dave Kravitz for facilitating. They are doing an incredible job of really getting us to the places we need to go to be effective. I spent 2 days on Zoom at the California School Board Association conference with a lot of other school board members, and there was a lot of really good information about all kinds of topics, obviously, that have to do with school boards, but I especially was keyed into a lot of the topics around financing and funding. And on that vein, I met with our state senator, Steve Glazier, to talk to him about our funding issues and what we need as a district to stay strong, and was also on a roundtable with Rebecca Bauer-Kahan discussing those similar issues. And so I will continue to do that work in hopes that we can affect some change in Sacramento. Along with my fellow board members, I enjoyed the San Ramon Valley Education Fund get together for the holidays. The fund does huge, wonderful things that support our school district. So that was really a great event. And also hearing all the 4 choirs from all the high schools Sunday night was also really amazing. We have so many talented students, and it was really a great way to kick off the holidays. And I just want to say happy holidays to everybody, and I'll see you next year.
It's been a really busy, really busy month. I've had a long list of things that I don't need to really go through, but I did get to do noon duty at Sycamore Valley and do a school site visit for Doherty Valley High School, which was wonderful. Got to sit in on the ethnic studies class, and that was a joy to see in a class that I wish I had when I was 17. I enjoyed many celebrations this last month for the halodays and various liaison meetings, and spent a few days with Trustee Hurd and Trustee Ordway and Superintendent Malloy at the CSBA state convention down in San Diego, and really learned a lot, and got to dig into some some big ideas that were exciting. And I just want to really take this opportunity to say that this year has been, I think, a very impassioned year for all of us. I think when we look around the room and we look at the advocates that come to our meetings, and we look at those of us that are working hard, the staff, the teachers in the classroom, the administrators, the students, the families, it's been a big year with a lot of burden. There's been, loss. There's been wins. And I just ask that everyone take these next few weeks once we're past finals and really take the opportunity to take a restorative break. I know I intend to, and really look around at the joy in your life, because there is a lot of that, and let's start the new year strong. So thank you.
I think we've all been really busy. It's like everything's kind of opened up. It's nice. I enjoyed visits to Diablo Vista and Bella Vista before Thanksgiving. It was so great to be on school sites and meet teachers and them in their classrooms with their kids. And yesterday I was at Greenbrook Elementary and got to visit 3 young classrooms and witness them doing their phonics pilots, and that was great to see. And the little kids are just so, eager and happy to see visitors. It was really heartwarming. I attended the Diablo Valley College San Ramon campus's celebration of their opening of their library, and I can't remember what the name of the room where the kids can eat, but their commons or whatever it's called. A few of us were there, and that was a really nice event. We had deep learning and innovation and equity steering committee meetings. Of course, the CSBA conference was great, and I enjoyed being at the delegate assembly for 2 days on the front end of that. I also attended the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman's town hall on literacy and biliteracy on December 6th. That was interesting to follow this new initiative that he is working on, and the different people statewide that he's pulling together to work on that. I just have to mention this along with what Shelley said about the choirs. It was so amazing to see all 4 high school choirs all performing beautiful pieces, super enthusiastic directors who totally honored their students. It was beautiful. And I just want to publicly say thank you to the Mormon Church Next Door for putting on that event and really rolling out the red carpet for all of the government electeds and the school boards. And I mean, they really made us feel special and appreciated us. And it was so nice. I appreciate them. And one last thing, thank you to the PTA Council for their holiday brunch that several of us were at. And I think I'll wrap it up there. Thanks.
Yeah. Just wanted to add, all the different events and stuff that we've attended. I actually helped out with the lunch duty yesterday at Montevideo. Got to spend a couple of hours there with grades 1 through 5, all in the NPR because it was raining. So it was no, it was great though. Was able to chat with some of the students. So it was really nice getting back on sites with students, and I have a couple of other lunch duty tasks coming up in different school sites too. But I also wanted to, yes, the choir was beautiful. I felt so lucky to be able to actually come back into a community, and especially for the arts, because besides the choir, I was able to attend the Reflections, the PTA Reflections showcase for their program, the art program. It was great because we were students and their family for supporting their arts, right? They're different, not only visual or music, but also writing and video production and photography too. So it was great. And again, shout out to San Ramon Valley Education Foundation, their Imagineering program, right, for the students. One of their classes is a theater, so they're putting on plays. So there's going to be an Oliver Jr. play coming up, I believe, Thursday evening, Friday evening, and then Saturday matinee and evening. So at Iron Horse Middle School. So you can go and support them. That would be great. I'll be there on Saturday that night. So that's it for me.
Thank you. The only things I wanted to add, I also attended the conference, but virtually, which was excellent. I really do appreciate that CSBA offered that as an alternative. And I think they did a really, really good job of the scope of classes that were available, and really took advantage of those. Also, this past week, I attended our Citizen Core Council Public Policy Committee that I represent us all on. One of the things I would just point out quickly from that presentation or that meeting was a presentation having to do with emergency alerts and a new system that's being put in place that really focuses within communities, very specific parts of communities when something happens, like a wildfire, and how quickly they can get alerts out, and the things that are being done right now to market those alert systems so people understand how they could find out quickly when they need to take some action. I attended the Ed Fund's holiday celebration. I appreciate all the work that the Education Foundation's doing, as well as the reflections, and a shout out to the PTA for the hard work that they put in to congratulate and really visualize the tremendous work that our students are doing in the arts and related things. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Minson. I'll be very brief at this hour, but I first want to start by thanking Trustee Ordway for the opportunity to work with you as president on behalf of our team. We are grateful to everything that you did and how you led and how you engaged. I know Trustee Bratt mentioned this, but I think about a year ago at this time, when you stepped into the president's seat and our two new board members took their seats. And if you recall, it's probably a meeting that all of us will remember, because for me, it speaks to the challenges, the depth and the intensity of what we have faced. And though things are better and different, and I'm grateful for that, I still know that there are challenges that we continue to deal with. And we'll just keep working together with our staff and with our community, focusing on our students, doing the very best that we can under circumstances that we hope will continue to move in the positive direction that they have been. And I know that some of the members of our community who aren't here now, but I'll make this comment and it'll be part of our board highlights, just to clarify that when it comes to clubs in our elementary schools, and I'm speaking about all clubs. Yes, we have Prism Club and we support that, but we also have chess clubs on some campuses. We have learning circles, and there are a myriad of opportunities at some schools. Some schools have more, some schools have less. Though our expectation is absolutely clear that the principal communicates what those clubs are, and parents always have the right to say that they would like their child not to participate, in light of some of the concerns that have been raised, we're revisiting that process. We met with all of our principals and many of our teacher leaders just yesterday, and we are looking again at how we can be that much more explicit so that no parent feels as though there is something happening at school that they are not aware of. So that's one thing that I wanted to state very clearly. Student Trustee Batra talked about another piece that we're working through, which is securely. Again, we're pausing a little bit in that. What I wanted to be clear about is we've always had a legal expectation that we keep our kids safe. And so there are always filters around where kids can navigate when they are on our network. Securely takes it to another level where it provides insights regarding which sites may be visited while kids are within the parameters of that filter. And what that has done is provided us some opportunity where we can intervene where kids may not be well, but it also has invited some challenge, which means that some kids have asked us, can we have clarity regarding what the system is looking for and why? So again, I am grateful because I spent last Friday, you are very keen students, 4 to 5:30 on a Friday. I am with the student senators and we were discussing this particular issue. And I wanted to thank the students led by you, Trustee, but I also wanted to share with the board and our community who's listening, we're revisiting this because there's a lot of positives, but there are also some challenges. So I wanted to share that. And then last but not least, the holiday is almost here. whether you celebrated Hanukkah before, whether you plan to celebrate Christmas, where Kwanzaa is something that you celebrate, or you just need a winter break. I hope that to our board, to our staff, and to our community, that we just do take some space and time, we do rejuvenate, so that we come back in 2022 raring to go. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. Just to the board members, just a reminder, there are some things that require a signature before you leave tonight, so please don't run out until you've had an opportunity to do that. I understand I do have one more speaker card. This should be specific to topic 12.2, the superintendent's report.
Yes, it is. So I just want to share with the superintendent that because of the recent mandates that you have imposed and installed, that really is assault of freedom of speech, and also it inhibits students from making mistakes at this age regarding their friendships, that I have instructed my students to stay away from all school clubs so that they don't be mistaken for being a bully or be mistaken into being solicited into sexual mentality that is really reserved for my students and their future spouse. So I just want to share that and think if the state of California Education Department continues to do this, they're doing a great job of making sure people don't have children. Thank you.
We are adjourned.